Tula nahi na, ma'am? Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning. Hi. Just a second to adjust.
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Hey. Hi, sorry.
Morning, ma'am. Welcome to the event.
Good morning, everyone. Today, the world is witnessing sweeping changes in the economical, technological, political, and environmental realms. The disruptions caused by the pandemic has altered the way we interact with each other. The current challenges have opened doors to many opportunities, accelerating trends that were already in play and triggering new ones.
Rightly said by Fred Rogers. Often, when you think you are at the end of something, you are at the beginning of something else. With this, ladies and gentlemen, we warmly welcome you to Vaachna, the online HR conclave of the Vinod Gupta School of Management, IIT Kharagpur. This gathering seeks to bring together some of the brightest minds of the corporate world to explore new ideologies and new avenues in the world of human resource management. I am Palak Tarani,
And I am Vijay Karotra.
and we will be your host for the event. Before we move forward, we would like to take this opportunity to welcome all of our distinguished guests and respected faculties who have been kind enough to spare time from their busy schedule. So, without any further delay, we would like to welcome our respected Dean, Professor Pradeep Kumar Ray.
A maestro in industrial engineering, yet a humble person. Professor Pradeep Kumar Ray is a proud alumnus of IIT Kharagpur, where he completed both his master's degree and doctorate. Professor Ray holds vast experience in healthcare system optimization, service performance modeling, and ergonomics. Currently, he's acting as a chief expert guiding APO-sponsored projects for 6 Asian countries. Professor Ray holds various accolades to his name. He's a recipient of the ORSI PC Malanobis Award and is a distinguished fellow of IEI and WAPS. We now request Professor Pradeep Kumar Ray, Dean of the Vinod Gupta School of Management, IIT Kharagpur, to share his insightful thoughts with us. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Ankush. Okay, so good morning to all of you. I hope that everyone is doing fine. On behalf of Vinod Gupta School of Management and on my own behalf, I welcome all the distinguished, the speakers from the industries, the other dignitaries, the students, our faculty members, and those who are directly related to the activities of CMI. In particular, I wish to welcome Mr. Swagoto Ganguly, Mrs. Prachi Rastogi, Mr. Ankush Arora, and Mrs. Tula Nihania Maiti Pandey. And of course, I'd like to welcome Mr. Shamor Singh Shikawat. I hope that their presence and their interactions with all of us will basically will tell us or will indicate to what extent this HR conclave topics are relevant in the present situations. As you may be knowing that the present situation is referred to as a very, very extreme kinds of situations, extremes. We are living in extremes. And even for the first time, possibly, the majority of the population throughout the world, they are affected in the history of mankind. It has never happened, in fact. Means the effect is, the universal, it's not localized. And even after, say, 1 year or the 6 months, there are hundreds of Nobel laureates, there are hundreds of scientists, they are at a loss what to do. We really do not know. So in the perfect, the definition, which this sort of scenarios have already been explained by several, the finest brains. Okay, they are born in the history of mankind. So when I refer to this particular the situations in the past, you may be aware of that even to explain these situations, there are there are mathematical formulations also. Like you may be knowing, the contributions of, uh, Carl Pearson many years back. He introduced the systems of equations, and those systems of equations are applicable in a problem called problem under uncertainty. Now, the today's situation has, is such that it has significantly, in the negative sense, has affected the operations of the industries. I do not know about whether it has affected the agricultural system, and it is well known that agricultural systems being part and parcel of the natural system, it has got its withstanding ability under extreme situations. Whereas if you go through the history of the industrial systems, maybe due to the demands of the human civilization, now it is essentially an artificial system that sort of, the opinions expressed by several scientists and the researchers throughout the world over the ages. Now, what has happened in recent times? I'll just highlight, in fact, and as it is an HR conclave, we'll assume our main hypothesis is that humans at all strata of the society have been affected severely. And this is a fact. And as far as the industrial, the systems evolution is concerned, today you said that yesterday it was based on aristocracy. And then we moved to, say, the democracy. And now what we are saying for the last 3 or 4 decades, we are in the technocracy era. Now, at this particular point in time, now we are almost all the industries is facing the problems under uncertainty. And I'm sure that our, the management students, they are aware of that what is meant by problem under uncertainty. It's not problem under risk even. Forget about the problem under certainty. So, and at this point in time, as to solve the problems, what we require, that is, the kinds of theories are missing. Absolutely, theories are missing. So we need to have, we can collect data and what is its impact in the short term, in the long term. Okay, all these details to be analyzed. Now here the focus is the kind of, the topic we have taken up for this interaction meet, that is essentially, you have very nicely pointed out, diversity and inclusion in the new normal. As I've been telling you that if you say it's normal, normally, but the general, the idea is, or general perception is that it is going to, continue forever. Is it okay? And normal is a term which can be interpreted by 100 persons in 100 ways. Okay, so it's more important that we should able to define what is this, and particularly building collaborative workplaces. Now, obviously, when you talk about management, now we focus on human resource management. And in today's context, what has happened, the collaboration and at the ground level, it means the interaction, right? So now, this is not the era of pure technology. It has been very clearly mentioned. And it is not the era of, like say, in one-sided approach. That means our main, the focus should be how to develop the interaction design in a given case. That means human machine interface within or embedded in an environment. And that's not a problem, knowingly or unknowingly, almost everywhere, but this is given. Now, another one important aspect we should highlight, that why do you say that sometimes we get confused, particularly this generation. A lot many times we discuss about, artificial intelligence. Lot many times we discuss about, machine learning. Yes, fine. Those are the developments. But if you look at the evolutions of the industrial systems, initially it was absolutely, the hard labor, human labor. Later on, mechanizations, then the automation, and then from the late 80s, it has been a reverse trend. That means automation will definitely apply, but when it is extremely, the necessary. That means that sort of approach the Japanese organizations have adopted. The operation is dangerous. Okay, so that means you can go for automation. There are many instances. Otherwise, that you cannot run a system without bothering about that man-machine interaction. And at this point in time, we have been learning, and what I'm telling you, in the present situations, humans are mostly elected, and the kinds of systems we should design, we should develop, it should, you create in such a situation, create an environment, working environment in such a way that not only the body, as also the mind of the humans, okay, should be on the job. It's a challenge. It's not that easy. It's easier said than done. And another very important aspects we need to, consider, that is the concept of individual difference. Gone are those days when you say that, yes, I'm dealing with the labor. Is it okay? Or I am a part of management. I have the right to manage. There is no such concept as right to manage. And obviously, without is a proper interaction, what happens that you cannot create a robust system. Now, if you look at, just I'm telling you, that if you look at our agricultural system, but this agriculture system is a model. Indian agriculture system is a model. It may be less efficient, but it doesn't matter. But it is highly, reliable systems, as well as, it's what you can say, that this is, the sustainable system, and it's a robust system. We need to develop, it is inbuilt. It's a inbuilt, and that's why we are respected. Whereas, because of historical reasons and scientific reasons, the dependency is there. In many cases, is 100% dependency on the European, the nations, on many products, in fact. So now, today, the time has come that we should say that, that to what extent you become self-reliant, and to what extent you become a robust system. Particularly the Japanese organizations from last 50 years, 60 years, they talk about the robust systems. So the time has come that all the Indian organizations, they should try to develop robust systems. That means assuming that this COVID-19, the world, or the kinds of situations we are facing, these are the external noise factors, and make sure that the effect of these external noise factors on the performance of a human being at a workplace is okay, it's minimum. And that way the robust system is developed. I hope that, our eminent, the personalities from the industries. They will be dealing with, the real problems that we are facing. And another important aspect is, when we offer a management education. Now, this management education, the kinds of syllabus we provide, the kinds of, what you can say, the curriculum we provide, and the kinds of topics we include in all the subjects. Now, given a situation, to what extent these are, relevant. So, with these deliberations, the outcomes of this, which are complex, we expect that, your opinions, those are, the speakers' opinions on this, and to what extent we must be able to the visualize of what kind of, the curriculum, we should develop, and to what extent it is fitting to the requirements of the industries. Sometimes we say feed job to man versus feed man to job, right? These are the two things. The capitalistic system of production 200 years back or 250 years back, when the system is developed through the industrial revolution in 1870s and all, mostly we are affected with industrial revolutions. So it is historically it is FMJ, feed man to job. Now, later on, when we started talking about the interaction design, that means the person, that means the core issue is whether it's an automated systems or mechanized systems or human level, the core issue is human. And with respect to the human, now what can you convert your system from FMJ to FJM? There are hundreds such cases. There are many human organizations to make the system human. So today, again, we have learned the hard way that to what extent, no, we must able to create a human organization. Whatever may be the level of technology, whatever it is, okay, ultimately it may not be, it doesn't matter unless, you create a human organization, not only for just one class of people, all classes of people, and particularly in Indian context, the workforce which you get, including from the top to bottom, there is a diversified, you have mentioned that the diversity, there's a heterogeneous mix. So it's a challenging assignment. It's not like, the Chinese populations or the Japanese, essentially they're homogeneous. Okay, so here the another dimension, but the idea is that even if you are an inefficient system, in all likelihood, we take the opinions of everyone and we try to make the system robust. Okay, so that, everyone feel like working in a given environment and call it a human organization. So this is one. Now, what have taken much time, in fact, because that sometimes we become emotional as a teacher. Though I know that I worked in industries for almost 10 years, and whatever the little the knowledge I have about the workshop practices, it is from the workers. So today it has come that whenever you try to develop a new system, and in the given context you try to make it robust, now we should get the opinion of the workers. Unless and until it is to a, the model you prescribe, it's validated by the workmen. Okay, to me it has not no validity, in fact. Is it okay? So down the line, at the shop floor we should work, and the shop floor within quote is to be defined at all levels. Okay, the idea is very simple, that the person who is working with the job, he or she is the best person to suggest for the improvement. So that sort of recognition is required, and that's why we say in the management education is essentially management for whom? Means management means human resource management. And here, definitely, I'm sure that these eminent personality will discuss about, the certain tools and techniques. Let it be subjective, but at least we must take a rational approach. So I hope that, so it will have this, the deliberations or the lecture sessions of the eminent personalities in this conclave will be very, very effective, and will gain a lot. And such activities of our CMI, okay, hats off to our the members, in fact, and particularly our young brains. In fact, they take so much pains and responsibilities, and I hope that it will be very, very good, effective HR. Wish you all the best. Okay. Thank you. Thank you once again.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for sharing your ideas with us. It has surely enlightened the minds of the budding managers and has set the tone for today's proceedings. And once again, we are extremely grateful to you for your guidance and support. Thank you.
We know that the essence of life at the beautiful campus of the Vinod Gupta School of Management, IIT Kharagpur, cannot be captured in a video. However, we will still try to show you a glimpse of it.
The Vinod Gupta School of Management, IIT Kharagpur, founded in 1993 by a distinguished alumnus and lifetime fellow of IIT Kharagpur, Mr. Vinod Gupta, is the oldest B school in the IIT ecosystem. Striving to develop technology-driven future industry leaders, VGSoM offers programs which provide a unique blend of managerial and technological insights into the business world. With a rich legacy spanning over 25 years, VGSoM has grown holistically, winning several accolades, and has been consistently ranked amongst the top B schools in the country by several prestigious ranking bodies. The flagship program of VGSoM is a full-time residential program for graduate engineers and master's degree holders in science, economics, and commerce. Featuring a unique mix of lectures, case studies, group projects, and workshops, the institute is currently amongst the best in India. The diverse curriculum consists of a plethora of electives on both core managerial and technological courses. Moreover, it provides valuable industry exposure through a 2-month summer internship program.
VGSoM boasts of a highly experienced faculty fraternity from various fields of management, with most of them having prior industry and corporate experience. Through a unique mix of theoretical and case-based lectures, the faculty strives to bridge the gap between the students' skill base and the industry trends and expectations. Also, the faculty-to-student ratio is one of the best in the country, owing to the less batch strength, which helps in greater individual attention by the faculty towards the student.
A few of the central facilities that are accessible round the clock in the campus are Central Library with a dedicated online digital section, gymnasium, canteen and guest house, swimming pool, and other sports facilities. nurturing the holistic development of future business leaders and contributing significantly to management education over the last 2.5 decades. VGSoM is a trailblazer in the true sense. Banking on its technical expertise, IIT Kharagpur empowers VGSoM in terms of infrastructure, intellectual resources, and a rich alumni base. With a strong will to be the best in the country, VGSoM welcomes you to scale new heights and be a part in its never-ending service to the nation.
Hope we all soon get a chance to create such memories in the wonderful campus.
Before we begin the central proceedings, I would like to introduce our esteemed panelists. Let me begin by welcoming Mr. Ankush Arora, Senior Vice President and Head Human Resources at Grofers. He has also worked across multiple organizations like Havels India, Jubilant Life Sciences, L&T Infotech Limited, Havels India Limited, and SAP Labs. An extraordinary professional with over 2 decades of experience in leadership roles, Mr. Arora has enabled organizations to achieve their business goals by aligning HR strategies and processes to build highly efficient teams. With a sharp focus on building value-based culture and an organizational capability to lead change, he is known for bringing companies' dreams to reality. It is a pleasure to have you here, sir. We hope that after today's discussion, our students gather exceptional insights from your views and experiences. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Inclusiveness is not just a moral imperative, but a business imperative, and diverse teams drive innovation. These are some of the enlightening words of our next panelist. We proudly welcome Ms. Prachi Rastogi, Diversity and Inclusion Leader at IBM APAC. With over 2 decades of experience in multiple industry areas like technology, finance, and healthcare, Ms. Rastogi is a staunch advocate of diversity and inclusion. She has been responsible for creating culturally diverse working environments to allow room for healthy discussions and enable individuals to bring their whole self to work and deliver their best. We eagerly anticipate her sharp insights, which will lend a more comprehensive outlook to this discussion. We're delighted to welcome you, ma'am. Prachi ma'am will be joining us in the discussion.
We welcome our next panelist for the event, Mr. Shokata Ganguly, Director, Human Resources, South Asia and Global Head, Industrial Relations at Avery Dennison, a Fortune 500 company. An alumni of the Harvard Business School and XLRI Jamshedpur, Mr. Ganguly is an accomplished Fortune 500 HR business leader with extensive global experience of working across all the continents in leading global MNCs with high growth, fast pace, and complex matrix structure. Having worked in Europe, Asia, and the US, his expertise in cultural transformation, driving profitable growth, converting industrial and employee relations have driven many businesses to stupendous success during his impressive career spanning over 3 decades. Besides leading HR, he has led many other functions and also have run a business P&L. Besides delivering guest lectures within India, he has also delivered them in UK and US universities. He has also been cited by the World HRD Congress 2020 as being one of the 100 most fabulous HR leaders of India. We look forward to hearing his valuable thoughts at this conclave. It's indeed a privilege to have you here, sir. Welcome to the event.
Thank you. My pleasure.
To further add to the canvas of varied perspectives on diversity and inclusion, at Vaachna, we are proud to present our final panelist for the event, Ms. Tulanahina Methi Pandey, CVP and Head HR, Bank Assurance at Max Life Insurance. Ms. Tulanahina has an MBA in HRM from Leeds Business School, UK. She has more than 17 years of experience as an HR manager in the BFSI domain. Her vast skill set ranges from organization development, recruitment and talent development, to employer relations and compensations and benefits. She also holds the coveted position of being a member of Leaders Excellence at Harvard Square. We are extremely delighted to host you, ma'am, and we warmly welcome you to this event.
Thank you so much, Palak, and a very good morning to all of you.
Thank you, ma'am.
With the panel primed for discussion and set to enlighten the budding managers with their enriching insights on diversity and inclusion, it gives us great pleasure to introduce the helmsman of this discourse, our moderator for Vaachna, Mr. Samar Singh Shekhawat, independent business consultant, startup advisor, professional public speaker, and thought leader. With over 3 decades of experience in multifaceted roles in various industries, Mr. Shekhawat has built businesses across diverse geographies, strengthening consumer preferences and delivering sustained growth and profitability. An alumnus of SIBM Pune, Mr. Shekhawat is a leader whose multicultural, multi-industry exposure and strategic foresight have been crucial in empowering continuous business leadership for both established brands and nascent startups. An outstanding speaker with the ability to mesmerize the audience, Mr. Shekhawat will coalesce the kaleidoscope of thoughts of our distinguished panel and enable us to internalize the broader objectives of the subject. It's indeed a privilege to have you here, sir. Welcome to the event.
Thank you, Vijay.
Thank you, sir.
Now, in the presence of our esteemed panel, we enter into the day's most exciting and insightful event. In the previous conclaves, we explored themes related to the emergence of the virtual workplace and managing employee well-being to ensure overall organizational productivity. But this very moment offers an exclusive opportunity for our future managers to gather insights from the views of our revered panelists and learn how business leaders respond to challenges despite being separated by distance in this new normal. Keeping that in mind as the goal for today's event, this year's theme will be centered around diversity and inclusion in the new normal, building collaborative workplaces. With this, we come to the part we all have been waiting for. I would request our moderator, Mr. Samar Singh Shekhawat, to take charge of the meeting.
Thank you for that, Palak. And I think we're still missing one of our panelists. Prachi has a situation at home that she's battling. I remember you mentioned adversity by mistake and then talked about diversity. So yes, she is facing a situation of adversity at home, but hopefully she will join us soon. I will get the proceedings underway. I will start with Sogat because just like me, he is the youngest panelist that we have. Sogat, now, as a veteran business management and HR leader who has worked across pharmaceuticals and other industries, what are your views on diversity, inclusion, and collaboration in the Indian private sector?
Thank you, Samar. Before I start, let me share my reverence for Professor Pradeep Kumar Ray. And also, I would like to make a special mention of Professor Pratim Chakravarti, who is the former director of IIT Kharagpur. I am privileged to be an alma mater of him. We were at the same school. He passed out a few years before I did. So in case if you happen to come across PPC, please do convey my regards to him. I now take the question which Samar has put in front of me. This is a topic which runs at the top of the agenda in multinational corporations. I would be one-eyed while answering this question because I do not have perspective of Indian companies because I've never worked for them. But in multinational corporations, it is very clear. The advantages that people see coming out of a diverse and inclusive workforce is multifold. It creates an agile workforce. It's a great business performance enabler. It creates positive behavior for superior organization health. Very importantly, it brings credibility as an employer of choice. When people see the organization from outside, they start liking the organization when they see that this company really strives to have diverse and inclusive workforce. I was reading some research, and it says that women demonstrate 5 of the 9 leadership behaviors better than other genders. So there is definitely an advantage over there. It also says that women apply 3 of the 4 behaviors which are frequently used by leaders to succeed: intellectual stimulation, inspiration, participative decision making. And on participative decision making, I think you all as students now understand that the world has moved towards consensus management. It is no longer, my way or the highway. If you get consensus from people, there will be much higher buy-in, and therefore the execution would be much, much better as compared to any other mode of operations. The other important aspect is that companies that have female leadership, and I don't mean when I say female leadership just to be the CEO, but when you have female leaders at the higher rungs of the hierarchy, there is an inherent trust advantage that they get from the female employees. So I don't want to restrict this discussion, only to gender, because diversity and inclusion is far more broader than just the gender issue. But yes, from my perspective, I think I have been fortunate to work with extremely diverse and collaborative workforce all across the world. Even now, when there is so much of disruption happening in the pandemic, and there is this disturbance that cropped up in US following the George Floyd, I would say, murder, there is very, very high impetus on global organizations like ours to further deepen the roots of diversity and inclusion and create a workforce that everybody feels proud to belong to. So that's my perspective. Samar?
Sagar, thank you so much for that. Ladies and gentlemen, those are golden words of wisdom from someone who's been doing this for the last 30 years. I particularly liked the point that he made about women leaders in the world. My personal favorite is Jacinda Ardern from New Zealand. And there are a lot of people who say Angela Merkel is actually the leader of the free world. And I think the coronavirus handling has been proven to be far better handled by women leaders, whether it is in New Zealand or Germany or Taiwan or the other countries that have women leaders. We've always had, it's funny that in the South Asian subcontinent, India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Bangladesh have always had, have all had women leaders. I wait for the day when America and other Western European nations will have, women leaders. Australia has had a women leader. So I completely agree with what you're saying, Sagat. I'll come to Tula. We have an agreement that I will shorten her name, and I was making a joke yesterday. Tula is also the lead protagonist of this beautiful film called My Big Fat Greek Wedding. If you haven't seen it, I would recommend all of you see it. So Tula, you are a senior HR leader who has worked across banking, insurance, where the narrative on diversity, inclusion, and collaboration, at least globally, and indeed in India as well, is fairly salient. Now, that is our sense as an outsider, but what is the scenario like in India in the industry that you've always been a part of?
Thanks, Samar. Banking and financial industry, and my name has been, acronymed Tula. So the finance and banking industry has also been acronym to BFSI. Okay, so I'll keep referring it to BFSI industry, which is Banking Financial Services Institution. It's an age of acronyms, actually. So the BFSI industry, if you look at the world, yes, you'll see a lot of women people, women across. However, it's an inverted funnel. As you grow up the ladder there, you'll see the percentage of women decreasing. So meaning to say, you'll have a lot of people if I break it up into 3 parts. So let's say the front line, the middle management, and the senior management. You will probably have a lot of people, women folks in the front line or the middle management, but as it moves up, if it tapers up, the percentage starts decreasing. And of late, you would have all heard or found out on social media that there's a lot of noise being created with the Citibank head being a female. There are talks of Goldman Sachs CEO being looked at. I mean, the position being looked at. They've actually shuffled their successors, and they're now looking at a female person to head. So mid and the junior most, yes, but at the top there's still a struggle of finding women leaders who can lead at the top. So that's the scenario globally. Now, if we come to India, and I'm sure you'll now be able to reckon the names that I will call out. With due respect to all of them, I mean, just about 5 years ago, or in the last decade, so we've had many women top leaders at the helm of banks. Arundhati, I saw in one of the presentations earlier, she, I think, came to a campus as well, heading SBI. You had Chanda Kochar heading ICICI, you had Kalpana Morparia, Naina Lal Kidwai heading HSBC, Shikha Sharma heading Axis Bank. I'm sure, some or most of the names you can reckon with. That was a good scenario for the last 5 years or maybe at least a decade or so. But now, today, if you see, all of them have, either resigned or stepped down, or their period is over, or they have retired. So the golden era of women coming at the helm of banks, currently we don't see as many. If you go to any of the bank branches, if you walk in, you'll see a lot of women there at the cash counters, as the service levels, even branch heads. So the scenario, the point I'm trying to draw here, the scenario is quite similar to that globally. You do have a lot of people joining the banking and financial, domain at the bottom. And yes, they do grow up to be a mid-level manager. But when you are looking at the top level, there is still a lot of gap. The percentage is really, really low there. Even in the insurance industry, as I may say, you have the head of HDFC Financial, HDFC Life Insurance, a female, Vibha. You have First India, insurance, there you have a female, but it's far and few. I mean, imagine how big the BFSI industry is in India, and imagine the women leaders that there are on the top. So we can't only, measure the salient nature of diversity and inclusion. I'm here only touching upon the gender bit. By looking at the number of people which are there at the front line or the middle management, we also have to consciously look at how many people are getting to the top. So there's clearly a long way to go as far as gender diversity is to be achieved in this sector. So there you go, Samar. That's my view on how salient it is in the world around and in India.
Thank you, Tula. Very enlightening. And, she referred to Goldman Sachs. So David Solomon is the current CEO of Goldman Sachs. And a lady called Stephanie Cohen has been called out as a potential successor. Now, the New York Times, which is otherwise a publication that I respect tremendously, has been receiving flack for calling her a female banker. Yeah. Why the term female banker? Why not just banker? I think it also has to do with most Indian names, I have a theory that 90% of Indian women's names ends with either I or A, which is typically the feminine gender in first names, that is, in most Indian languages. However, if you look at Punjabi, Gurpreet could be both male and female. Jaswinder could be both male and female. And it'll be interesting to see whether people actually asked, is this a male or a female? So I think, so that's great. The other point that Tula mentioned was about, the preeminence of, I shouldn't say, but because I'm contradicting myself, women bankers, so to speak, largely driven because of KV Kamath. And yes, internationally, there have been women CEOs, but few and far between, and including in industries that were hitherto considered male domain. So Ginny Rometty, for instance, or Indra Nui, my super boss that I work with, Carly Fiorina at Hewlett Packard, and so on and so forth. We'll move ahead. I'll come to Ankush, who runs an exciting, company. Ankush, now you have worked in both new age and so-called old age economies. Considering the hyper-competitive nature of the business and a highly competitive landscape where speed is of the essence and perhaps takes priority over issues such as diversity, inclusion, and collaboration, how do you deliver on this agenda in new economy businesses?
Sure. So I think, Samar, if you look at the startup ecosystem, and you rightly said, the first priority for any startup founder or the CEO would be speed or growth, as they call it, and because that is necessary for their survival in the early days, right? You get fundings basis how fast are you growing, and when I say growth, it is not 10-20% we are talking about. They talk of 120% growth over month on month or quarter on quarter. That's the normal thing. So I think growth, speed, they are on their radar, but it's a matter of time. And I think it varies from startup to startup. It varies from org to org, that how quickly you realize the importance of D&I. See, in most of the startups, you're still trying to figure out what your customers want. You're still trying to build something while you are running an org, right? You're still trying to, understand your customer's mindset. You're trying to evolve as an organization, and you need diverse thoughts. You need skills where people can ask or challenge you from a diverse background, right? So I feel that, in startups, it's actually, in absence of, although you may not have a D&I policy or a conscious approach towards building a diverse workforce, but by design, it automatically starts happening. A classical example is that, most of the startups who are at, the unicorn status right now, 2 to 3 years of their journey, they've started consciously building a workforce which is very diverse. Like they all start with, most of the startups are founded by journalists, like everyone who's willing to do anything. Today you are a head of operations, tomorrow you could be head of customer service, right? But there comes a time, maybe after 1 year or 2 years, where you start building workforce basis the subject matter expertise. Like you'll hire a customer experience expert from the market to lead that vertical for you, right? So I think startups, it's a lot more easier because of the generation that you deal with. And today's generation, the millennials, the generation Z that we talk about, they are far more aware about D&I. They are far more conscious about it. So I think, yes, to start with, early stages startups may not have a very well-defined, structured approach to D&I, but it is there in their way of working. It is required, because otherwise it is extremely difficult that if you work with a siloed mind, this is what I am going to do, unless you are challenged. And most of the startups have these kind of people who challenge each other. And that comes from diversity of thought. I'm taking diversity in a broader sense, not just the gender part of it. But today, if you look at the startup ecosystem, there are plenty of examples you can give where, the leadership team has significant number of, females, right? And that helps them drive growth. That helps them in terms of, understanding the consumer mindset with an absolutely different viewpoint. So these are my thoughts. I'm like, I believe startups, it's relatively easier for startups to have this diversity and inclusion rather than an organization which is like, 80, 90 years old. And then you suddenly bring in this concept of D&I. that calls for a huge change management. So this adaptability of startups to D&I is a lot more easier as compared to the older economies.
Thank you, Ankush. What an interesting response. It's sort of almost like diversity and inclusion by accident. But I think it also appends the conventionally held belief that it is perhaps an easier agenda to drive in larger established organizations, as Ankush very clearly said, or seemed to imply, that there could be a lot of baggage and a lot of heritage and a lot of "it's always been done this way" attitude that larger organizations perhaps could suffer from, whereas new startup businesses have no precedent, and therefore you reinvent yourself every day. So that's very interesting to hear. Prachi, I'll come to you. I don't know whether you were there when Palak was introducing you. Palak accidentally mentioned adversity instead of diversity, and it was sort of a Freudian slip, because we know you're facing a situation at home. I hope you've controlled. I hope it's under control. So thank you for joining us. As they say, der se aaye, durust aaye. Prachi, now you are a senior HR leader who heads a function where this topic is actually your full-time job. It's in your designation. And you work for an organization that historically has had a strong culture of fostering it. Now, my question to you is, what challenges and best practices can you share?
Right. Thank you very much, Samar. And I'm extremely sorry for joining late. Yes, there was a situation at home which I'm still sort of dealing with, but all is well. And so excited, so delighted to be with all of you, to share the space with all of you. Absolutely brilliant to hear Ankush, Tula, and Saugad. And even more excited because you're the ones who are going to take on the corporate world, the world outside of corporate as well. Tomorrow, and very excited to tell you what's happening in the real world outside, especially in the technology space. So challenges many, best practices many. Before I get to it, I must tell you a very good news. IBM has been chosen, recognized as one of the best companies for women in India for the 5th time this year. And we're also in the Hall of Fame. And also we've been chosen as one of the most inclusive companies in India, 2nd time in a row. So this is absolutely brilliant news, and it has not happened just like that. There has been a lot of work which has gone into it, and I was very eagerly listening to Ankush when he talked about startups and large giants. IBM is a large giant, 109 years of diversity and inclusion, but we haven't taken that for granted even for a second. And the fact that I have a full-time role doing diversity and inclusion across APAC is a testimony to that. Challenges, many. Tula said very beautifully that a lot of women join at the bottom, they even come to the middle, but suddenly it just tapers down at the top. So we have a huge, and this is specifically in India because I look after APAC, so I know what's happening in APAC and the other countries outside. So it's interesting that I'm just talking about IBM right now. We are 50-50 in terms of gender outside of India. I'm just talking about APAC. And you know what happens in India is just 30% women and 70% men. This is approximate what's happening in technology companies. And that is overall. If you just sort of divide it, say how many at the bottom, how many at the middle, how many at the top is really small. Though IBM has been dealing with it and we have great numbers at the top as well, but that is what matters. So the biggest challenge is, how do you stop women to leave at their mid-careers? And it mostly happens because of marriage or children or parental responsibilities, which often lands on women's shoulders today. And also companies need to evolve now. Now we need to respond to what is happening in the country. There's systemic bias, and it has only increased with the pandemic. Suddenly there's no house help, suddenly kids are studying from school, and this is by default that a lot of responsibility is coming onto the females. Not to talk about this generation I'm talking to. Of course, this generation is very, very different. I'm pretty sure the men I'm talking to are and will make sure that you have equal, if not more, responsibilities at home. But the scenario is different today with the mid-level people. So we sort of responded to that. We've made sure that not just about the lockdown, but otherwise there's childcare services. There's a program called Charisma we have for the returning mothers, and also for new parents, not just females, but males as well, to make sure that males too start taking primary responsibilities at home. And then we have curated programs for women to take on leadership roles. So the biggest challenge is that we want women to be in decision-making roles, in leadership roles, to be sitting on the board, and just not at the bottom and middle. And as almost all the panelists, all three of them said, that inclusive leadership is just not restricted to gender. It is beyond gender, beyond sexual orientation, beyond physical and cognitive ability. And we do a lot of work in the LGBT space as well. And, we use AI a lot for that. We use Watson analysis a lot for that. So we keep a count on how many people from the LGBT space, lesbian, gay, transgender, bisexual people are we hiring, how many are we promoting into leadership roles, how many are actually leaving, and what are the reasons. So we use data a huge lot. And the second thing as a best practice is, as Samar asked me, is D&I is not an HR agenda. We hold business leaders accountable for it. Their skin is as much in the game as ours. So actually, you'll be surprised to know that data is not, shown to business leaders by me or my team. It is shown by business leaders to us, that this is where we are, Prachi and team, on hiring, on numbers, on LGBT plus people, on people with disabilities, on veterans, on women, and you help us here, and we sort of curate programs for them. We do workshops on leading without bias, on unconscious bias for them. So the whole game has changed in technology companies, and specifically in IBM. We do a lot of work on employee experience, because that is really important to us. How employees feel, are they able to really get their whole selves to work? For example, if I'm from the LGBT plus community and all of you are not, and we are working in the same environment, you will share pictures of your vacation, but I will hide. I will hide because otherwise you will get to know that my partner is probably a woman. And my energy will go more into hiding instead of expressing, which means that I'm not exploring my full potential, which means who's at the loss? IBM, or the company I'm working for. So it is a business imperative at IBM and many other organizations that take D&I as mainstream. And the third and the last most important thing for us is external eminence. So the right coveted awards, making sure that the talent we have at IBM gets their due credit externally and internally, is extremely important. So I would say, as Ankush very rightly said, that this generation is very different. You are probably much more inclusive already. You'd be totally okay with, while we needed, or people in the corporate world, especially who've spent a lot of years, we needed a lot of training to understand that people can have a different sexual orientation. Probably it'll be much easier for you. So welcome to the world. The world is waiting for you. The work, and there's so much work we've done to make it an equal world for you, and happy to learn from you going forward. Back to you, Samar.
Thank you, Prachi. Her passion is clearly evident from the animated way in which she responded. So thank you for that. And I think what better proof of the organization that she works for actually living those ideals, considering that Ginny Rometty is now, I think, executive chairman. I think she's I'm not sure whether she's still.
Yes, she's moved out. She's here till December, but she's moved out. She's stepped down, and Arvind Krishna is our new CEO. But absolutely proud of the work that she's done over the last few years.
Arvind, in fact, Saugata is another IIT alumnus that was very talked about, not as well known as Sundar Pichai and Satya Nadella, but perhaps equally well known in the United States. So thank you for that, Prachi. And I'm glad you mentioned the LGBTQ thing. See, one of the problems is that I was not able to connect with Prachi, last night, and she has inadvertently answered the next 2-3 questions that I wanted to ask her as well. So I'll have to quickly reframe some of those questions, or certainly try and articulate them differently. As a very quick aside, my daughter is a musician and she studies at the Berklee College of Music in Boston. And Massachusetts is a liberal state and marijuana is legal there. And all her life, she studied largely in Christian schools. She was in DPS east of Kailash. I'm an ex-Dipside. And then La Martiniere in Calcutta, and Bishop Cotton Girls in Bangalore. And she's now a senior, of course, gone into a final year. She'll graduate next year. And the reason I'm telling this long story is that in literally 12 months, she went from a talk that the father and the nun, the sister gave, because this is part of the South Indian church, gave to the entire students sitting cross-legged on the gymnasium floor about how physical relations are ordained by God only between man and woman, to 12 months later, she's filling in at the orientation at Berkeley a form, and their first question they ask is what is your gender? How would you like to be identified? And is your current gender the same as your birth gender? And it is also, and it's gone beyond its LGBTQI plus, and there's some other trans and all sorts of other things that my daughter keeps explaining to me. In fact, they have faculty that do not refer to themselves as he or her. They refer, and they say, and in fact, it's written as identifies themselves as them and they. So you're actually not calling that person he or she. You're calling them them and they, which is, I mean, I'm just the journey, a journey that she's traveled. But thank you for that, Prachi. Saugat, I'm going to come back to you. Now you've been managing director of an organization, and you have run P&L functions directly, as well as perhaps as part of management committees at the international level as well. Now, I was part of the UB board. I was part of the management committee. I drove P&L as well for many, many years. And I faced this myself. I'm sure you have, how with the emphasis on business results, that largely determine the mandate for management committees and P&L leads. How easy or challenging is it to drive this agenda?
Well, I take a cue from what Ankush said a little while back, that unlike in startups or companies which are just born, the priorities are very different, and there are things that actually get streamlined in the course of their functioning. I have been privy to some of the very established organizations. And as Prachi was saying, most of the companies that I have worked for are probably 90 to 125 years old. So in this kind of companies, you already have certain principles and values which are ingrained in the organization. And diversity and inclusion has somehow been a top priority which has been ingrained in these organizations throughout. So I have not really seen that as a big challenge. During my career, I have never felt that diversity or inclusion, anybody sees it as a derailer, but rather everybody sees it as an enabler. The other very important aspect that I want to bring to the notice of everyone is, and it's from my own experience, because I have worked for manufacturing companies. Manufacturing companies typically have, very strong unions, and I've had the privilege of working with some of the doyens of Indian trade union movement, who later on went on to become, central ministers and state ministers and all that. What we have seen is when you have a diverse and an inclusive workforce, the advantage that you reap is tremendous. It is because of the philosophy that when one homogeneous bunch of people work together in the factory, their thinking pattern is also in one direction. But when you have a heterogeneous mix of people, their thinking pattern is diverse. And when I say heterogeneous, I just don't mean inclusion of women in the workforce. It adds tremendous value. But people coming from different ethnic backgrounds, different linguistic backgrounds, different religious backgrounds, it really decreases the level of opposition with which unions sometimes stand up. There are situations in union management relationship where, and this is more historic, I am saying, probably you would not experience it because unions have really evolved in most parts of the world. I'm currently dealing, with a situation in Honduras, in Central America, where I have a feeling that they are what India was 25 years back. But India trade union has emerged out of it. They understand. Would you believe if I tell you that the union came forward and said, sir, during this pandemic in India, we are ready to forgo our long-term settlement clause of increment from April to September. This is absolutely idealistic. Now these are things that happens when you have a diverse and an inclusive workforce. And it is for the organization to understand this. Sometimes we keep saying that, Professor Ray was talking about right to manage. Many companies, you would hear this, we don't have the right to manage the workforce because the union is far too strong. But who has let the right to manage go away? It's because the company has mishandled them. If you handle them in the right fashion, you would never, ever feel the need to have that right. It is seamless. I don't know if all of you know this gentleman called Rusi Modi. He was the chairman of Tata Steel. And he was, in our times, he was a doyen of Indian industry. And I'm fortunate to have spent some time with Mr. Modi face to face. He was leading Tata Steel at a time when they had 80,000 employees in Jamshedpur. 80,000. Some of the union leaders, they had internal union, they never had any external union. Some of the union leaders came to Mr. Modi and said, sir, our toilet is very, very dirty. It stinks. You know what he told the union leaders? Just take the board from the management toilet and put it in your toilet. Just swap the boards. That simple step that he took won the hearts of people over there. Again, I'll take another name, Mr. George Fernandez, who was India's External Affairs Minister. At one point in time, he mobilized so much in front of Tata Steel that he wanted to enter and create a union. 70,000 workers of Tata Steel stood behind Mr. Modi and closed the door. The unions couldn't get an entry into Tata Steel. Why I'm citing these examples? Because these are the real challenges that you're going to face when you come into the practical world. But again, a rider that things have changed. Unions have also become much more progressive nowadays. So sorry, Samar, to have put so much of context in it. But yes, in short, I think I have only seen the positives of this and never faced that kind of staunch resistance to this program of TNI.
Thank you, Saugat. You shouldn't apologize at all. We should thank you for sharing those stories. Frankly, you've added so much value. And while these names are familiar, in fact, I reviewed a book on Rusi Modi as part of my symbiosis curriculum, and I've been to Jamshedpur and XLRI several times. It was a big market for us when I was at UB. Unfortunately, now there is prohibition in Bihar, and I think after the next elections, perhaps that will be repealed.
Actually, Samar, it used to be Bihar. Now, actually, it is.
Oh, yes, of course, it is now Jharkhand. But what's happening is that, well, we are not on an Alcobev discussion, but what's happening is that most of the industries actually flowed into Uttar Pradesh because there's lack of supply in Jharkhand, and people just cross over the border and go and drink and come back again. So we can have a discussion separately. But that's a fascinating story of Rusi Modi, who was, in the words of J.R.D. Tata, or referred to as pound for pound the best manager that India has ever had. I mean, that's, and if you don't know who Rusi Modi is, you should Google the name and find out exactly what an illustrious personality he was. I wish I had an HR leader like Saugat working in my organization. Perhaps it's his wisdom and guidance and benevolence, so to speak, is exactly what most organizations today need. And I have promised all the panelists that I will ask them one tough question at the end of the panel discussion. So we'll wait for that to come. Tula, I'll come back to you now. I'm assuming all you people know what is BFSI, right? So I can see lots of people on the screen. Incidentally, I'm watching you. Guys on screens number 7, 8, 9, and 10 have put their videos off. So Jharna, I don't know what the guidance is and what the rule is supposed to be. But remember, we are sales and marketing people, and we go right down to the retailer first. I'll go to the last screen first. Not to scare you, but just so that you know that I've got my eyes on you. Tula, I'll come to it. So she mentioned BFSI. I'm assuming all of you recall what it means. If you don't, I will repeat it once again: banking and financial services. In this industry, Tula, people skills, communication skills typically matter a lot. And I personally can identify a banker the moment I see one. And there is perhaps the temptation that there are certain individuals who are good at certain things, quote unquote, communication and people skills. Let them stay in their positions, because that will hopefully drive business results. And that gets, the diversity and inclusion agenda gets sacrificed at that altar. What are your views on this?
Well, Samar, I find, and with all due respect to the question, I find a sense of bias in the question rather. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell all of you why. We're talking about a topic of diversity and inclusion, and I'm very clear in my mind that it's not a topic, it's not a program, it's not a vogue which has become so popular in the new normal or in the lockdown period, and we just not talking about it just for the sake of talking. It's actually a way of life, if you were to look at it. And I'm going to expand this topic of diversity and inclusion a little further than gender, than diversity of thoughts, to a little more deep-rooted, serious aspects of this topic, which is unconscious bias, which is a little bit of an imposter syndrome, and mostly blind spots. We born and we are raised up in a certain environment, and all of us have been born and raised up in different circumstances, scenarios, families, religions, localities, geographies, etc. And by virtue of the fact of who we are, where we are from, each of us have a different mindset of how things should be. So what should be a banker look like in your mind? How should be, somebody who's not doing a white collar job should be look like? How would be somebody from a certain geography look like? How you already have those thoughts in your mind in terms of how do you expect, basis on what you've gathered all over the years, should certain things be? Okay. Now, what happens when you are exposed, when I'm exposed to different circumstances? I build these thoughts in my mind, and it goes into my unconscious mind. And I'm sure, without doing a talks on science, but this bit that, 95% is unconsciousness and 5% is a conscious brain. So whatever we say, we act on is all driven by our unconscious mind, and that data there is stored because of how we've been seeing things over the years. And that's how our biases get developed or it becomes deep rooted. That's also a very important aspect of this diversity and inclusion. Okay. So therein we create perceptions of how things should look like. And now I'm just bringing the discussion back to what Samar has actually asked. Communication and people skills. Those are the two prominent aspects that we identify bankers with, or people in the financial industries with. People have to be savvy, they have to speak nice, communicate, they have to be in suits and ties and, trousers and pinpoint dressing, perfect. And when you talk to a banker, there's a sort of, inspirational, relevance to the visual aspect of it. Yeah, that's very true. That's a fact, However, let me, and you all are all young leaders, and that's why I'm emphasizing on this topic. When you want to make a career in whichever field you are, yes, of course, that industry would require you to blend in with certain characteristics of the industries. And in this case, maybe it's communication and people skill, which is required in banking and financial services, because it's a people-driven industry. You have to work with people. You have to sell or guide people on their financials and money, which is very close to my heart. If you are going to come and talk about my money, you rather, I would want you to be all encompassed with all knowledge of how things should work. And just by the look of it, I should be convinced that, yes, you're going to deal with my money. You better be sure what you're talking about. You don't want to give money to somebody whom you think, with your perception, your mind, again, with a bias, maybe, who can't do a good job. Okay. So yes, people and communication skills, they come in very handy. But in my industry, and I'm wanting to call the BFSI as my industry as of now, taking the liberty because the other panelists are not from BFSI industry. So I'll refer to this as my industry for some time. I worked for about 17 years now in the same industry. Fortunately, unfortunately. I have also seen success stories of people who are not good in communication skills, who are not good in a way how they present, but the substance, the context of their knowledge of maybe the product or the process of how they deal with people is extremely good. The point I'm trying to bring about is, you all are all young leaders. You all should not have any biases in mind in terms of whether you can achieve what you want to achieve in a certain field, in a certain industry, to say, oh, I'm a little shy. I don't know how to talk as much. My gift of gab is not good. Will I be successful in a certain industry? I think the point to ponder here is you should be a subject matter first. And yes, there are, again, I'm saying success stories on both sides. Yeah, there may be somebody who's good with regards to the subject matter, may not be so good with regards to communication or people skills. Mind you, the skills also can be taught if you're willing to learn. There are very many learning platforms where you can learn this skill. On the other hand, somebody might be very good in communicating, expressing, very good people skills, needs to quickly learn the job, the role, the requirements of what a person in a financial industry does. So there are success stories to both sides. My only request for you all as a takeaway from this question is, do not be closed in your mind on how should one present himself or herself in a certain industry, or typify the specific requirements in a certain industry. In India, डॉक्टर का बेटा डॉक्टर होगा, इंजीनियर का बेटा या बेटी इंजीनियर होगी, या लड़के इंजीनियरिंग पढ़ेंगे, डॉक्टर्स बनेंगी लड़कियां, and so on and so forth. We've come a long way. Let's be honest, we've come a long way from there. Now everybody is becoming everybody. So it's time to actually open up to this topic and look at the finer and the deep-rooted aspects of this topic, where I'm trying to say, let's open our mind, everybody, we can become everybody. All skills are learnable to a certain extent. Maybe some of us can master some of it, some of us can't master the other bit of it, but keep an open mind, no need for any biases. There are many more skills which can take you to the top if you lack one or either of them. So over to you, Samar. I think I have tried to broaden my discussion and taking it a little further away from rather than just sticking to the point. But I think it was important to draw some parallel to the question in terms of bringing a broader perspective to it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tula, for that response. And by the way, when Tula and I spoke yesterday, she felt there was a bias in this question, and I deliberately decided to go ahead with it because I wanted her to give exactly the response that she's given. And the reality is, as young leaders, all of you will face these biases. So they don't necessarily represent my own personal views, but I felt it was important for the panel to address them and for you people to have the benefit of the wisdom of the panelists. So that is there. You know, it's in a light-hearted way. I mean, I know I'm speaking to people who are almost all of whom are engineers. There is a saying that in India, people first do engineering and then decide what they want to do in life. I'm assuming all of you have seen Three Idiots. So pursue your dreams and your passions is what Tulahina is talking about. I mean, I'll give you some numbers because I did this for Heineken a few years ago when their global CEO, Jean-François von Boxmeer, was visiting, and we're UB was a Heineken joint venture. India produces about 350,000 MBAs every year. We produce about 52,000 doctors. By the way, the number of doctors is abysmally low. And I'm not even talking about the way it's distributed because it's largely in urban metro areas. But we produce 1.5 million engineers every year. So even today, there is obviously a very strong preference for engineering. I sent my daughter in to study music because she's prodigiously talented. And the struggle that, or the validation of bias that Tula is talking about, in my extended family, there is zero support for this decision. You know, because I faced this thing that, you know, music padhkar kya kar legi? Matlab singer ban karke kya ukhad legi? So I tell them, I said, aapke bete ne MBA padh karke kya ukhad liya? You know, I said, I have one daughter, and, you know, we might as well let her pursue her passion. So brilliant message, Tula. I'll come to you, Ankush. He's been listening very patiently to what everyone else has been saying as well. Now, Ankush, there is a lot of talk, and some of the panelists have referred to it as well, around equal opportunity, transparency, no discrimination on the basis of gender, ethnicity, Saugata mentioned, religious or sexual or linguistic orientation. Yet we see several insensitivities and governance lapses in businesses. I was tempted to write in new age businesses, but that is patently untrue because, you know, established organizations are as likely statistically to falter on this. Now, what are you doing, for instance, to strengthen process and culture in a young organization like yours?
I think what you mentioned, the initial few words sound very cliched, like straight out of a HR manual or a section in the annual report. And I'll add one more word to it. It's called zero tolerance. Organizations very proudly display that we have a zero tolerance to any of these lapses and all. So I think most of the organization, including new age as well as the established orgs, they have this code of conduct. They have zero tolerance policies and procedures. Right? There are disciplinary actions around lapses, those kind of things. But I think fundamentally what I believe is that none of these things are going to help you unless you consciously work towards finding out that why people are behaving in certain manner, which is, against this principle of D&I. So there has to be a conscious attempt by organizations to change that behavior, to remodel that behavior. And I'll give you two very pertinent examples. So this pandemic over the last maybe 6-7 months has actually given organizations an excellent opportunity to test their character on D&I. Simple example, and not for any specific gender. Most of the employees today are working from home, right? How sensitive you are when you are setting up meetings. How sensitive you are towards people who have kids to take care at home. how sensitive you are that they have families to run, right? How sensitive you are when you're fixing up, meetings during lunchtime. So this is one area that, personally, I believe that, I have sent out instructions in my organization where I've said that there has to be a dedicated 2-hour lunch break, right? In office, we used to have, 1 hour, but since people are working from home, there are additional responsibilities on most of us, be it a male or a female. We are working towards, work from home as well as we're working for home also. Let's acknowledge that, right? The second thing is that, I was talking to somebody. So there's an organization who's based out of Noida. So they were on the way of bringing back people to work. They started operationalizing their, office hours and all. So suddenly they said that there was a rule which said that not more than 30% of your people should be at the workplace. So when the 30% roster came out, there was not even a single female employee who was called to office. And this is something which actually told to me by their HR person, and they said that, yeah, because ladkiyon ko kyun bulana office mein? It will be risky for us to, call them to office. It was a huge uproar in that organization. The female employees actually walked up to the HR head and, actually gave it to him that, why this discrimination? And that's something that I've been telling people, that the generation today that you're dealing with is very, very vocal about it, right? Even if you don't have policies, there will be people in the system who will ensure that you get the message that you need to be conscious of these things. You need to be sensitive about these things. So all in all, I think first and foremost, organizations need to really work towards changing that behavior. There has to be a feeling about respect and trust, not in the organizations, but respect and trust towards your fellow employees. Be sensitive towards, their needs. Be sensitive towards their feelings. How do you? And I've seen so many examples where we've actually let go of people because they were not fair to somebody who was interacting with them. Like we were hiring a candidate, and the candidate was happened to be a female, and the interviewer had asked some questions which he should not have asked. So we spoke of unconscious bias. So it was not about that his intent was not good. It was just that it could have brought in that unconscious bias in terms of taking a hiring decision or no. So we run a lot of programs. We run a lot of, counseling sessions for people just to ensure that they are not biased in any form or manner when they are taking a critical decision for the organization. Back to you, Samar.
Yes, Ankush, that was a very forceful, shall I say, response to unconscious biases. I was at UB, and I remember I used to joke that being a management committee member and a board member, 90% of my time went in terms of POSH, prevention of sexual harassment policy, alcohol policy, code of conduct policy, gifting policy, and so on and so forth. And I like the point you made about, people's home. Most homes are not large. And while I'm speaking, some of you may have noticed my camera going off. I have a gardener running around. I have my wife giving me dirty looks. I have my daughter who's practicing her music. I have 2 domestic help who are coming around, etc. I'm trying not to let it disrupt because, frankly, we are intruding on their space and not the other way around. So thank you. At UB, Ankush, we had tenured people in manufacturing and finance and other functions where it was extremely hard for us to make them understand that it is not all right to call a lady sweetheart or dear or darling or baby or any of that nonsense. And they genuinely didn't understand your, even words, patronizing words like you're old enough to be my, or you're young enough to be my daughter, or you're like my brother, or you're like my sister, etc. No, none of that. They are just professional colleagues, so yes, so that's very interesting, Ankush. Prachi, I'm going to come back to you. When Jharna and the VGSoM team shared the topic with me, I felt that it had enormous potential to not restrict the conversation around diversity and inclusion only during, the COVID-19 situation. shouldn't we be driving diversity and inclusion to build collaborative workplaces as a matter of corporate philosophy and policy in any case, and not just restricting it to the so-called new normal?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question, Samar. I don't think that is the case. People or organizations who've understood the importance of diversity and inclusion, who've understood it's a business imperative, who've understood that you can only bring intelligent solutions for the client if you are diverse and inclusive in nature, they're not really restricting it. If you're speaking, Samar, then you're on mute.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Prachi. Your voice is a little faint. Can everyone hear Prachi? Or is it only my internet? I'm not sure.
Tell me. Can you hear me?
Okay,
not?
much better now. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so I was saying that absolutely that is the case for organizations that realize the importance of diversity and inclusion being mainstream. We don't see that it has increased or decreased, or it is only happening because of the lockdown or the COVID situation or the new abnormal normal that we're living in. If at all, and we mentor a lot of organizations, a lot of startups to start their journey in inclusion and diversity. If at all, it is only done, it has only intensified the work on inclusion, because clearly we see that if we don't do conscious work on diversity constituents now, it'll be a setback. There'll be a lot of women who will leave jobs because suddenly a lot of work has come on their shoulders. There are people from the LGBT plus community who are not in the best of domestic conditions, many of them, and people with disabilities who don't have a whole lot of accessible environment at home. So we have to do a lot. I can tell you that our work at IBM has only increased, has only gone deeper with the COVID, as we coexist with COVID. For example, the moment it started, and then it was almost the same time when the unrest happened with George Floyd's murder in the US, so we came up with a program worldwide called Embrace, and we actually took a work from home pledge in that, which was like, we are about 400,000 people across the world, and nobody can really ask anybody to come on video. So if I'm not camera ready and I'm not okay with coming on camera, nobody can ask me to forcefully come on camera. So things like that, and I loved what Ankush said, that zero tolerance for any bias, and that is the unconscious bias. Tula also spoke about it. I loved it because it is not that people who are doing it are really intentioned. They are absolutely kind people, but it's just that they've grown up like that. Right now, if I close my eyes and somebody says a nurse, a woman just pops up in my mind, and that's not because I'm a cruel human being, but because that is how I've been brought up, and that can change. All I have to do is I have to be a little more aware. I have to be a little more alert about this, and therefore, in almost all the organizations now, and new ones are starting only with gender, which is great to start with, but the big ones and people who've done this work for years are absolutely very conscious of LGBT plus, veterans, of people with disabilities, etc. But I think most importantly is that it's not just about focusing only on women or any other diversity constituent. It's also constituents. It's also about inclusive leadership, which goes beyond all of this, which means that it actually makes a lot of business sense if I have diversity of thoughts. Swagat also talked a lot about that. If I have cognitive diversity at the top, only then can I do intelligent work. And that is only increased. So just coming back to your question, if organizations are only doing it during lockdown, let them have coffee. But I think most of the organizations are pretty intelligent, and if they've started it, they're going to continue. And if they started long ago, they've only intensified the work during the lockdown.
Thank you, Prachi. I like that expression, let them have coffee. I was watching Coffee with Karan, where before it became politically incorrect to watch it anymore. But in that, Akshay Kumar was talking about how he is far more diplomatic than his wife, Twinkle Khanna. And apparently every time Twinkle is about to say something that Akshay feels will offend someone, he tells her, bete chashme pehen lo. So it's a code language. It's code language that they have to say that, think before you talk. But I like what you said about unconscious biases. Just last night, my wife and my daughter and I were having conversations around, and I mentioned that to my daughter that your mother is becoming so much like her mother. And then my daughter turns around and says, you're becoming so much like Dadu, which is and I've consciously, we actually become, the harder we try not to be like our parents, the harder we actually end up becoming like our parents in the way we talk, the way we walk, the way we think, the way we speak, and so on and so forth. Interestingly, even the sports world, if I look at cricket, and I'm guessing all you guys and, all of you are more Premier League fans, because cricket is now becoming a much broader and mass sport. I mean, I've been worked with sports all my life, and it's Premier League football that is the cool sport amongst the cool young kids, in urban India. But even there, the terms batsman and batswoman have been changed to just be called batter and bowler. And no one refers to it. And it came from overseas, by the way. The Australians, South Africans, Kiwis, and the English started calling them batters and bowlers first. And now almost all commentators say that. That's number one. Number two, in Hollywood, the word actress is politically incorrect now. You just say actor. And you can, if you so choose, you can say male or female actor. But the advice I'd give to everyone here is this scenario is, it's a shapeshifter. The things on ground change so quickly. For instance, you can't say African American anymore. Black is the more politically correct term than African American. And 5 years ago, during Obama's presidency, African American was a politically correct term to use. So my suggestion to all of you, and learn from Sogat, who's worked, and some of the other panelists who worked across cultures and geographies, and Prachi, I'm going to ask you a question around culture, a little later, is that remember, some of you may work in overseas cultures and in overseas geographies where culturally things are very different. So it's very important for you to sort of be sensitive to that. Okay, we are at the halfway stage, and I've already received 20 questions. And by the way, these are filtered questions from the Students Committee that's doing a super job. We'll come back to you, Sogat, which is a question that I think everyone has been waiting to hear the answer to. In today's time, Sogat, with working from home, social distancing, endless Zoom calls, even a consultant like me is on 4 or 5 Zoom calls a day. So I can only imagine what it must be like for all of you that are still with organizations. Endless Zoom calls, screen fatigue, in many cases could be driving loneliness and a lack of belonging. A lot of people have gone back in the South, as they say, to their native, and they're in smaller towns as well. So how does one drive diversity, inclusion, and foster collaborative workspaces in this scenario?
So, Samar, if I may dispute this question to some extent, in the sense that what really has changed from pre-COVID times? The technology companies, the people were working from home. They are used to this lifestyle. I come from manufacturing industry. 25% of India's GDP depends on that. They can't work from home. All of them are coming to the plants. Irrespective of your gender, irrespective of your ethnicity, irrespective of your language, you have to be there at the plant to do the production. The entire workforce on the supply chain side is working from the locations, from their sites. Otherwise, India will grind to a halt. So what has changed is people like us, which is a very small minority, who used to work from office, probably is taking advantage of working from home. And therefore, we are making it a big hype in terms of giving a lot of adjectives to this. It's causing loneliness, frustration, fatigue, and all that. But fact of the matter is, 60% of India's GDP, which comes from the services sector, and especially the technology companies like that of Prachi's, a lot of the people have been working from home throughout. And Prachi, when your term comes, please bear me out on this. I was speaking at Accenture a few months back, I think just in the month of March before we went into lockdown. And I saw that their offices were half empty. So when I checked with their CHRO, Lakshmi, she said, most of our people work from home or from customer locations. We hardly have any people over here. So not really much has changed, is the first refutal that I would like to make. Second is, now that we have a situation where the most unlikely people have started working from home, yes, it does make the matter slightly complex, because the proximity with which we used to work, we don't enjoy that. The presence of colleagues that we used to work with does not exist so much. So we are relying on technology to do the catch up. But I think whether it is the new normal or the pre-new normal, I think the focus continues to be the same on diversity and inclusion. And I would very strongly urge the audience to believe that whatever we talk of, whether it is gender, whether it is culture, ethnicity, whether it is differently abled population, nothing is going to work unless and until we create the right access and the opportunities. We have to be the enabler for those pillars to actually come to work or come to success. Small things. You may say a lot about differently abled people, but until and unless you have a basic ramp in the office premises, they will not be able to make it to your office. And they would definitely not like to be lifted by somebody to come to the office. Right? So therefore, it's very important to create that environment and infrastructure, which is an enabler for this kind of people, which is beyond the ordinary, to come into the workforce and be considered as inclusive. There are companies who spend a lot of time and energy to explore these possibilities because they understand that there are compulsions, not just societal compulsions, but there are statutory compulsions. And at the same time, there are bigger compulsions. For example, multinational companies like ours, we are bound by the European Union Charter, which talks of diversity and inclusion as a mandate. We are party to International Labour Organization's Charter on Human Rights, where we have to abide by certain principles. So while those are mandated guidelines, but companies have started embracing them because they understand the goodness of doing these things, which ultimately positions you differently from others. These are the value propositions that you create that differentiates you from your peers. So, Samar?
Thank you, Saugata. I was hoping he would say what he did, and I'm so glad that he did say what he did. I hope all of you listened very, very carefully, because there is a lot of hype around all the fatigue that is happening, and I'll make a slightly generational statement where, I read somewhere that at your age, maybe 50, 70, 80 years ago, people were dying in war. You know, our grandfathers were called upon to die for their country. We've been told to sort of stay at home and wear masks. So yes, I think I'm so glad there was a practical breath of fresh air. And Swagat, you mentioned about the ramp. You know, at United Breweries about 10, 12 years ago when I joined, we're a large manufacturing marketing organization. We had 31 breweries. We had some of the women came and said there's no toilet for us, because when the original, and I'm sure you've all experienced this, when the original workforce and organizational structure design was contemplated, there were no women in the hiring scheme of things, because typically our breweries are in what's called C category areas, away from urban areas, you know, and not necessarily, areas that are considered physically unsafe. So there was never any plan to have women. But over time, we had women in the workforce, and they do a super job as citers on the production lines. Of course, now we have electronic, you know, bottle inspectors. But, and again, don't want to make a biased statement. My experience has been that the skills of meticulousness, dedication, and so on and so forth that women particularly tend to bring were deemed appropriate for them to be citers on the sidelines, and there were no women washrooms for the women. So I remember our then HR head, Joe Norona, who you may know of, Sagat, you know, is retired now, lives in Goa. He actually suggested exactly what Rusi Modi suggested, where he said, just because he had sort of got tired of being able to get women's toilets approved as part of the capex and, you know, construction plans, and he just did this swap, and the women started with great hesitation, started going into the manager's washrooms. And trust me, in all our 31 breweries, in a period of about 6 months, we had women's toilets. Closer home, in our corporate office in UB City, I was on the 3rd floor, and this 3rd floor used to be the sales and marketing floor. And over a period of time, when I came in, even though 99% of all beer consumption in this country is male, we were looking at women as a target audience, and eventually over a period of time, 50% of the marketing team was women, and there were a large number of women on that floor, and there was only one bathroom or one washroom meant for women, which had one closed cabinet, which was inappropriate, and we couldn't do anything because you have to break down the entire plumbing lines, you know, within the office. So these practical challenges are actually reflection of the so-called unconscious biases that both Tula and Prachi were talking about. So thank you for that, Swagat. Tula, I'll come back to you. Now, when you started your career, you were, you know, handling talent acquisition, and of course, it never leaves you. You know, today you're the HR leader, and talent acquisition is very much a continuing part of your roles and responsibilities. Now, you know, senior tenured people like us are able to look at the so-called cultural fit in a prospective fresh hire or lateral hire reasonably well. You know, we can assess in a few minutes whether this candidate would be a cultural fit for the organization. How do you assess for whether this person would be able to, you know, work in a, I mean, is sort of consistent or with the agenda of diversity, inclusion, and collaboration that we would like to drive?
Right. In fact, Samar, thank you so much for asking this question.
You're not going to call this a biased question, are you?
This is definitely not a biased question. I would want to call this as a very relevant question for the larger audience, because it talks about hiring of fresh talent or maybe lateral hires. So this is a pretty relevant one. I'm sure there are a lot of us here on this meet who would see a lot of with me's into it. So again, pardon me for my acronym. With me is what's in it for me. Yeah. So we're talking about a topic which has become globally so important, diversity and inclusion. बहुत theory भी पढ़ ली है, बहुत लोगों की बातें सुन ली है, lot of talks happening. But मैं क्या कर सकता हूँ उसमें? Why am I even, you know, in this discussion? What am I going to take out of it? How am I going to live it? And I'm, as I had mentioned earlier, it's a way of life. So if Tula is saying it's a way of life, mere way of life, how is it relevant? How is it valid? My thought and mind is I'm a student, you know, I will finish and I want to apply for a job. I want to have campus placement. Usme diversity and inclusion ka topic aayega, to kya main ye sab theory bolungi? Will I say all this will I answer theoretical answers to the questions being asked? Or how will I be able to live this? Or how will I be able to embed this when I go and join an organization? So that's why I say somewhat it's a very relevant question. Yes, talks are nice. And if you have to make it a way of life, then obviously there are certain characteristics that you have to be focused on, you have to resonate with. And those are the areas that when somebody hires you as freshers into an organization, will look into it. Since you all are management students, and for the larger audience, you would have had glimpses of leaderships, and you know that there are so many aspects of leadership, from authoritative leadership to collaborative leadership to servant leadership to authentic leadership. And I'm sure all of you want to get into a job and grow up the ladder and become a leader. You all are the future leaders anyways. So what the organizations are trying to do today is trying to get in more authentic leadership. How is it different from a normal leadership? Hitler was also a leader and a very good leader with a lot of accomplishment. आप उनका productivity analysis करोगे तो उनका जो productivity है is very high. But did people like Hitler? No. Okay, why not? What did he miss? I think that's the answer to the question in terms of what will somebody who wants to have a D&I mindset, look at. Now, I'm just putting the aspect of diversity separate, and I'm going to talk about inclusive mindset to be able to bring about the answer to the question. Although they are intertwined, diversity ke bina inclusion nahi ho sakta, inclusion ke bina diversity nahi ho sakta. But I'm going to just talk about the mindset that you need to develop or you need to portray when you are going to be hired or when you want to join the corporate life. And probably in my experience, that's what the leaders will also look at when you grow as well in your career. So when you hire a fresh talent, when we hire a fresh talent in a company, and I'm sure my fellow panelists will also agree, they want to look at a cultural fit of their organization. हमारे culture में इस type के लोग suit करेंगे कि नहीं? So and all sorts of culture fits comes with certain characteristics which have a certain element of inclusivity already built into it. I agree with Shogata. This topic has become very vogue in today's time because there's an opportunity to be able to abhi nahi to kabhi nahi, to be able to instill the D&I in today's era with remote working, etc. so beautifully. But it was always there. When recruiters would come to the campus, they would be asking on some questions which we would earlier term it as soft skills questions or maybe behavioral questions. Okay, those have gained more prominence today because those mindsets actually also have a direct correlation to productivity. So ever since this topic has become important, there's been a lot of research on this topic, and research have shown direct productivity or correlation of how a D&I mindset or how a D&I culture in a certain organization leads to better productivity, because you have diverse thoughts and you have different kinds of people contributing to a different agenda, to a certain agenda, and then there is innovation, and then there's growth, etc. So when we go out to a campus to hire a fresh talent, and if we are looking at an inclusive mindset, how will we do that? Various assessments call out the requirements. There could be some trick questions, or there could be specifically questions intended at bringing out your empathy, your inclusive set of mindset to be able to see whether you fit into the culture. Net, all that has been looked at whilst hiring a fresh talent, or maybe a lateral hire from a campus or otherwise, would be how inclusive is your mindset, how empathetic you are, how are you going to accept different views Do you feel comfortable working with all generations? Do you feel also comfortable working with a diverse group? I'm very hopeful of all of you and the generation that's going to come to. I have a teenage son, aged 14, and I see a lot of inclusive mindset with the new teenagers as well already. And I'll just try to bring about a practical aspects of what you're leading today, of how you're already in this DNI unknowingly. So you have a campus life. Most of you, I am hoping, are staying in the campus. And in campus, what you do is actually inclusive, is actually helping you to build your inclusive mindset. And how you are dealing with, let's say you are organize a program like this, you're dealing with various activities. You're coordinating, collaborating with a lot of your students, colleagues, your teachers, etc. You're trying to do something, bringing all the minds together, bringing different perspectives together. And this way, you are also developing your collaborative nature. You're also developing a mindset to be able to take in different views and act on it. So again, the point I'm trying to say is it's all there. It may be a coin which has been it's been coined maybe, but a chance to be able to develop that is prevalent in all sectors of our life, even in your student life. So don't get too worried about how am I going to be developing a DNI mindset. It's all available in your practical scenario, day in and day out. Look around and you will see you have a lot of opportunities to be able to develop this mindset, to be able to have an inclusive bent of mind, and all you go, you'll crack. If you're thinking, how will I get hired with a DNI mindset, you'll crack it beautifully. Over to you, Samar.
Tula, thank you for that. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip some of the questions that I had, and I'm going to come to Ankush and Prachi for the last two questions. Unfortunately, the four tough questions that I had, one for each panelist, Saugata and Tula will sort of will dodge a bullet, but maybe in the questioning from the students we'll be able to, because we're running out of time, and I already have, I think, 15 sort of questions from the students that I'd like to address as well. So, two questions, one to Ankush and one to Prachi. Ankush, this is that tough question. I'm going to put you on the spot. We've all read and heard about various company CEOs all over the world, and leadership people being sacked, or worse, incentives being clawed back, and for violations of this topic under discussion. And companies have faced lawsuits as well. And without taking names, we're all familiar with these cases, both in India and overseas. What can be done, according to you, to restore faith, both within the company and with external stakeholders?
I think first and foremost that any organization needs to do is to acknowledge the lapse, that yes, it has happened. And mind you, it takes courage to just come forward and say that yes, we are at fault, right? So that's one. I think what additionally needs to be done to champion this DNI initiative within the organizations, right? Because if there are lapses around, you need to fix it. And punitive action or setting up committees or disciplinary action is for me is something which is kind of you are reacting to it, right? So in order to be proactive, and just like any other initiative, to get everyone together, just connect it to the business. Very often we see that if there is a goal which is connected to business growth, if DNI can be connected to business growth, and we have ample research which is available that connects DNI to business growth or business benefits, right? Let's do it, and let's be vocal about it, right? Link it to your mission, link it to your purpose statement. Why does organization behaving in certain manner? Link it to DNI. Do those things. And I think one most important thing that today organizations are missing out, most of them, is that whenever there is an achievement, right? You will give credit to everyone in the world except for DNI. Very rarely you will see that the DNI team or the DNI champions are being given credit for delivering a business outcome, right? How many organizations today acknowledge the fact that yes, we have achieved 40% growth, we have achieved fantastic stellar results in the quarter, and we give credit to our diverse workforce? You know, credit will be given to product, credit will be given to certain policies, credit will be given to the marketing, right? But very rarely you will give credit to the fact that you have a very diverse workforce, you have a very inclusive way of working, right? So for me, these are few things that organizations today should be stepping up to if they have to restore trust in what has been happening over the last few years, that, you know, a lot of organizations have been under the scanner, right? And lastly, I think there has to be a tremendous support from the entire leadership. You really have to walk the talk. There's no fun in creating a DNI structure or setting up a DNI team and then the leadership team is completely swayed in a different direction. So I think one, come out in the open and acknowledge the issues, give credit to DNI as an initiative, embrace it, right? And I think Shogato can relate to it. I had my fair share in the manufacturing sector. You know, the best of the ideas actually come from the people who are working on the shop floor. They can touch an equipment and tell you that ये साहब ये equipment खराब होने वाला है. The guy may not be able to speak proper English. He will tell you कि ये साहब ये 3 दिन में ये pump बैठ जाएगा, right? As an engineer who's come out from a top technical school, you may not pay heed to him, right? But today, if I have to give credit to him, embrace his opinion. So innovation, new ideas come actually from the ground up. So one, come out in the open, acknowledge the fact that yes, we've goofed up, right? We are not there yet, and work towards it. Give credit to DNI as an initiative. Be sensitive to people. So these are my thoughts on how do you want to build trust.
Yeah, excellent. Ankush's point about engineers being the person on the work floor or the foreman operating the forklift would be able to tell you just by touching the equipment. In many cases, not even that, they just hear it. And if the sound of the engine is off, they can tell you that there's something wrong with it. So yeah, that's excellent. I also loved what Tula said about having an inclusive mind first. My personal belief also is that your personal ethics also impact your professional ethics, the way you think. The last question before we go to question answers is for Prachi. This is a personal sort of, shall I say, experience that I had at working at PepsiCo. We used to very proudly say that we are the 13th best organization in the world for diversity at the time. I'm talking from the years 2000 to 2006. And there was a joke at Pepsi that if you were a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant male, you could never get a job at Pepsi. But at the same time, and this is a case study within the HR team at Pepsi of the time, is if you were looking to find a Hispanic, Roman Catholic, female MBA in Panama, and Saugat just mentioned Honduras, it was almost impossible to find. Now, what are your views on this?
These jokes don't come out of nothing, out of nowhere, Summers, and you very well know that this is the diversity fatigue we were talking about. That this is what happens, that if you force a lot of things which do not come naturally, and if you do not, like Ankush said, that if you tell people, if you fail to tell people that this is a business imperative, this will happen. We will come up with such jokes, and still it'll be difficult to find a Hispanic female somewhere in Panama. So it goes both ways, and that is the reason why a lot of companies, and definitely IBM, wants to have allies in the system, not just for women, but for other constituents as well. Because at the end of the day, 80% of the people who are sitting in decision-making roles today are men. And therefore, it's important that we get them as allies with us. Unless we do that, it is not very, it's like, you don't know where you're going. You're talking a lot of stuff, you're talking great things, but it's not getting anywhere, because ultimately your numbers have to speak. A lot of conversations, trainings, workshops only make a lot of meaning if they're measurable results. Simple as that. Are you hiring more women at the leadership? Great. Then your diversity and inclusion is really doing some great stuff. And that will happen if we get managers, decision makers, leaders, which are mostly males right now in the corporate world at the top. You get them as allies. They understand that it's in their benefit, it's in business interest that we be more diverse and we be more inclusive. If that doesn't happen, then we'll come up with this joke, and there are many other jokes that I can also tell you that we'll come up with. So that's what I think, Samar, about this.
We're all in the mood for jokes, something. The other thing I want to tell you people is certain things that were acceptable to say and do at a certain point in time are not necessarily acceptable today. So never forget, ladies and gentlemen, the context, the historical context of things. That's point number one. Point number two is something that is legal may not necessarily be morally correct. I mean, slavery in the United States, for instance, was legal, but it was morally illegal or morally incorrect. So with that, Saugat, Tula, Ankush, and Prachi, it's been an absolute pleasure in moderating you. We will, and thank you so much for your wisdom, your patience, your meticulously prepared answers. I'm sure the students have learned more in these 90 minutes than they would at any other point of time in their lives. I hope you've absorbed and soaked in, everything that you've heard today. Jarna, is there anything I need to say, or shall I straight away get into the question and answer session? Because we're running out of time, so that's why I thought I'll just, is that okay? Shall we just go to the Q&A?
Yes, sir, we can proceed to that.
Okay, so the first question is actually a marketing question. With the permission of the group, I'll quickly answer that. With brands having ushered into the age of woke washing, i.e. using progressive values as a marketing ploy and appropriating social activism as a form of advertising, and many times having it backfire and inviting public criticism, what should the brands make sure their woke washing also translates to real palpable action and just to maintain a public image? So a bit of a long question. I'll try and give you a short answer. See, at the end of the day, it has to be married to your purpose, the brand's purpose. For instance, so that's point number one. Point number two, do not for a minute think that these corporations have anything other than their own narrow business interest in mind. So for instance, when Nike decided to put Colin Kaepernick, who had been their brand ambassador for many, many years, when they decided to put him on the cover of Sports Illustrated, because he sort of became an icon for the black community because he took a knee during the national anthem, which led to Donald Trump personally calling up the NFL bosses and telling them not to hire him or renew his contract. It wasn't really necessarily from Nike, and Nike, there's no love lost for Nike in the corporate world, a decision that was their support for Black Lives Matter. It was more a calculated decision taken by Phil Knight and John Capriotti, who has since left the organization, that they did a sensitivity analysis and they realized that a lot of black athletes and black people will buy their shoes, and a lot of white people, for instance, will not buy their shoes. In fact, hashtag Nike or hashtag boycott Nike started trending. So my suggestion to you is buy Nike shoes if you like them, not necessarily because of their stand on various issues. So that's one view. The contrarian view is that brands can no longer afford to stay neutral. They need to take a position. So an example where it spectacularly failed was the Pepsi Kendall Jenner ad, where you had people rioting and Kendall Jenner suddenly comes and gives everyone a Pepsi and everything's fine. People stop rioting. Now in Europe and America, there was a massive backlash saying that the world's problems are far too complex to be solved just by drinking, PepsiCo. Heineken recently did something that was called Worlds Apart, where they, for instance, had a homophobic man along with a homosexual locked in a room, and they need to build a bar, and if they build it correctly, they can share a Heineken, and only then can they tell each other about themselves. And that experiment worked really well. We sort of worked towards breaking minds. In India, we did something called Generations Apart, where we said, there's this commonly held belief that a father and son cannot have a bottle of beer together. In fact, you see the IPL ads that are running today are exactly an extension of that. So, it needs to be married closely to your brand purpose. Otherwise, your younger generation calls it out. For instance, Havel's Hava Badalegi was a good way of marrying the fans, and I think we have one of our panelists who's actually worked at Havells. I can't recall who it is, but you know, the fans air changing the environment. The other more recently, and Sagar talked about the Tatas. Tata Tea's Jagore. I mean, tea literally physically wakes you up, and the whole anti-bribery thing. So I think, short answer, it needs to be married to your business purpose, and the link cannot be tenuous. It has to be credible. We'll move ahead. Women comprise 39% of global employment, but account for 54% of overall job losses since May 2020. So the question is how to protect gender equality during the times of pandemic or any crisis. Would either Tula, Prachi, who would like to go? Did you get the question? It's about the loss of women in the workforce. I'm not disputing the numbers. I'm not sure about the source of the data. 54% of overall job losses. I'm guessing this is in India since May 2020. How do you protect gender equality during the times of pandemic or any crisis? Prachi, maybe you should take a shot.
I'll probably go first. This is a typical example, and if the numbers are really correct, this is a typical example of unconscious bias. It's at its best play right now, because probably these are the companies where some layoff needed to happen, and then the unconscious bias was best at play. Who do we need, who should we fire? These are the people we should fire, and we didn't care because we inadvertently just sort of, it was at play and we didn't consciously include, so we inadvertently excluded people. And it'll always be, when we talk about gender, it'll always be women. When we talk about sexual orientation, it'll always be LGBT plus people, and people who are visually impaired, and people who are hearing impaired, and etc., etc., etc. So this is a typical example. If you don't use AI data analytics right now, even if you're laying off, this will happen. And that is why this urge of A, working on your unconscious bias, B, using data, because both on their own are pretty lopsided. So extremely important, and many companies are doing that. It's no good talking about D&I and having the right policies and the programs if you're not actually seeing your dashboards, your analytics, your artificial intelligence, and actually if it is making a difference. Otherwise, these things will happen.
Okay, I think that was very quick and informative. You know, the next two questions have been answered actually. In this new normal, when we are trying to fit our large office spaces into the small space between the four walls of our homes, how important is it to have a clear boundary between personal and professional life in order to ensure that these aspects are not compromised but are complementing each other? I think Ankush answered this in a fashion where he talked about 2-hour lunch breaks and stuff. So unless Ankush you'd like to add something, I think in some way you've answered this.
Yeah, it was pretty much answered. But the only thing is that, you need to be sensitive towards people in terms of that they are operating from home. So your policies, your procedures, your way of working has to be flexible enough to adapt to that, yet giving them space, yet giving them time with their family. So that's about it.
Yeah, and so the next question, with increasing efforts taken by various organizations towards diversity and inclusion, what are the steps taken by the hiring team to eliminate the subconscious biases? I think Tula has answered that question very, very recently. Tula, unless you'd like to add something?
No, I think I had taken a little bit of an extra time and been exhaustive in the answer, but they're all looking at an inclusive mindset. They're all looking at how well you will fit in and how well you'll be able to collaborate with people internally, and that you will add to the productivity and not create frictions. So that's just a bit of summarizing of what I had said earlier.
Right. While the answer is exhaustive, I can guarantee you the audience is not exhausted. There are 3 people who have asked this similar question. I'll go to Sagat for this question, because the question of what are some creative ways to proactively source candidates from underrepresented communities. So that is one. And when thinking about the importance of representing a brand as a diverse and inclusive workforce, many struggle with wanting to represent our employees from underrepresented populations. We don't want to tokenize this. How do you go about and make this look seamless? And I think there's another question of steps to recruiting from different economic strata from tier 2 or 3 cities in India. discouraging other sections who do not? Okay, so there is one question basically in three different ways around, Sogat, around sourcing talent from underrepresented communities and geographies and ethnicities. So that will hopefully answer three questions.
Okay, thank you, Samar, and for the benefit of the audience, pardon my lack of focus when I talk of this questions without putting too much of emphasis on India, because for quite a while I have been handling larger geographies. So my answer might be inclusive of other geographies. So just to add to this question of underrepresented areas, what we do is, and I'm speaking from a manufacturing perspective. When we set up factories, we look at various parameters. One of the parameters is the ease of doing business. And when you want to do business in a much smoother way, we often end up going to export processing zones, because export processing zones give us a lot of flexibility in terms of operating in a particular way, which when you are outside, you don't get. Plus, export processing zones all over the world, and especially in developing countries, have set up very strong norms which are comparable to the best countries in the world. Typically, when you see these export processing zones, they are far off from the city limits. They are not necessarily within the cities. And when you are setting up a factory over there, you tend to go to the nearby communities, you engage with the educational institutions around those places, because the biggest impact that you would like to create is to employ the people who are around that belt. It doesn't matter which religion he or she comes from, what language he or she speaks, what orientation he or she has. It just doesn't matter. You are looking at merit, and on merit, you're going to hire the candidate. This has been happening for several geographies. And if I just give you an example, I think on 12th of March, I was invited by the India business to go and inaugurate a plant in not Coimbatore, it's called Tirupur, which is the textile hub of India, which is close to Coimbatore. And I was very happy to see that all the operators over there, they have called the operators by a new name called operating engineers, and they're all diploma engineers. Of course, there is a bit of IT technology associated with it. There is a bit of artificial intelligence associated with it. So a normal 10th pass operator would not be able to do it. And these were all diploma engineers from around that belt of Tirupur. And what was very heartening for me was that almost 50% were female, young girls, bright young girls, and they made a commitment to me that going forward, when we scale up, we are supposed to have X number of operating engineers, and we promise you that we are going to have 50-50 over here. So that's very enlightening. But at the same time, not just women, it also had various other inclusive parameters which were taken into account. And I had always been referring to those parameters of inclusiveness. I want to say a quote, and I keep using this. Of course, this quote is borrowed from somebody. One line is borrowed from somebody, but the other two lines are made by me. When someone is included, someone wins. When few ones are included, few ones win. When everyone is included, everyone wins.
How lovely.
And
If you, sorry, yes, please. That's fantastic. If you see MS Dhoni, who I regard as perhaps the greatest captain India has ever produced for men's cricket. I'm very careful to say men's cricket, but I think there's some amazing leaders in women's cricket generally across the world. But you'll notice something that Saugat said. He always gets the junior most, and please excuse his performance of last night. He always gets the junior most team member to hold the trophy that India wins. It is something that Rohit has learned and Virat has also learned from him. So that's, visual manifestation of everyone included. Okay, there are 6 or 7 questions. I've set an alarm. We need to finish in 10 minutes. I'm going to I think I'll come to Prachi. This is a question about how can we ensure that people are addressed properly in the workplaces? Is it okay to ask them directly what they're okay with? Would that not make it more differentiated? So I'm guessing the issue is about not only calling Mr., Ms., etc., but for instance, I know people who take offense to being called, excuse me, young lady, or excuse me, young man. It's seen as being patronizing. So I think it's a question around what is the acceptable way of addressing someone in the workplace. More importantly, is it okay to ask them that how do I address you?
Yeah, very good question. Absolutely okay to ask people. So what we do, we ask for pronouns. A little while ago, someone was talking about his daughter, and people decide that we don't want to be called he or she, and we want to be addressed as they, them, theirs, and that is what we do in India. Actually, IBM worldwide, we do that. People choose their pronouns. So you can't just say Prachi, and you can't just use she, her for me without asking me at IBM. And that started happening with a few organizations in India as well. So the best thing is ask. If a mother has returned from maternity leave, don't assume that she's not open to a night job. Don't assume that she's not open to a job which you think only other genders can do. Ask that woman, are you okay to do the job? Ask people, what is your pronoun? How would you like to be addressed? Ask people, if you're confused about something, just simply ask. People don't mind being asked, and people, especially from the diverse constituents, and I work so closely with women, with LGBT plus people, and people with disabilities. They don't mind being asked. They don't. You see, people who are visually impaired, they've lived like that. They are employed like that. So they are completely. And we as the organization, we provide them the right accommodation so that they can do their job. So they don't mind being called something, or all you have to do is just face them, ask them. Don't open the door for a person on the wheelchair without asking. Ask if that person really needs the help. If that person doesn't need help, don't try to be extra helpful. So asking is the best thing.
Excellent. And when you're asking, please don't be patronizing, because you never know. I know a lot of differently abled or special athletes who say, I don't want your sympathy. I want your acceptance. I want your respect, like any other ordinarily abled person would be. I'm going to ask just one question more, because then I think there is a vote of thanks and a faculty interaction. So I'll come to Ankush, Saugat, and Tula. I was going to ask a question about women struggling to maintain work-life balance of Tula. And then I thought that I need to have an unbiased mind. So I'm going to ask Ankush of that, because then she will say, why should only a woman have to answer about women struggling to maintain work-life balance? So as you can see, I'm learning quickly. So Ankush, I'm going to come to you. We often see women struggling to maintain work-life balance, especially working mothers who have their families to take care of. We know, some of us know what happened with Prachi in the morning today. They often develop serious health issues due to taxing work schedules. Now, this is the question. I'm not sure this is true, but that's the question. But I think the question is around work-life balance for women, working women, and perhaps working mothers as well, because they say that they do 2 jobs. And Indra Nooyi was famous for telling me, leave the crown at home, and her story about her mother. We've all heard that story when she was announced chairman of PepsiCo or CEO of Pepsi, she came home and she was parking her car in the driveway. And before she could tell her mother said, "We've run out of bread and milk. Will you please go and get that before you come home?" So, the work-life balance question, Ankush, for you.
Yeah, I think work-life balance doesn't see any gender. Even, for the sake of it, I'll say that even males face work-life balance issues. That's but true. Coming to specific question at hand, that female employees tend to have tendency to suffer more from a work-life balance because they have a dual role, and that is something that if you look at it, that is how our society has been in the past, and I think slowly you are moving away from it. Like we've seen all our moms and grandmoms taking care of our the kitchen, the entire household is under their supervision, and now when they step out of the comfort of the house to a workplace, there is an additional responsibility, right? But I think today most of the organizations, these are all like organizations which have taken this initiative of diversity and inclusion very, very seriously. They are consciously aware of the fact. I was giving you an example that in one of the organizations where meetings were set post 8 o'clock, because it was the norm when you were working in office, that 8 o'clock meeting is the normal thing. But today, in today's scenario, when you look at it, 8 o'clock meeting is not a normal thing, because there are people who are operating from home. They have family responsibilities also. In absence of domestic help, people are responsible for managing their kitchen, not just women, even men, right? So I think organizations are taking cognizance of it. It's a welcome step, and I think but at the end of the day, a lot of work needs to be done. It's not, I wouldn't be comfortable saying that we've kind of arrived at a situation where all is good. There is a lot of space to be covered. Lot of conscious attempts have to be made by organizations to be sensitive to people, especially sensitive to women, right? Like most of the organizations today don't have, Prachi was giving an example, when a female employee comes from maternity leave, right? There is not even a proper space for her to have, a kind of a nursing room where she could spend some time or, talk to her baby if the baby is at the daycare, right? So we don't have that kind of infrastructure. But today organizations are consciously building that. So there are steps being taken. There are steps being taken towards managing the stress level of especially female employees, because we understand that they have to manage, home as well as work, right? But the situation is changing for sure, and changing for good, but there is a lot of work that needs to be done.
Can I just add a small thing?
Of course, I was going to say, I said Tula and Prachi are practically, so first, did Ankush acquit himself honorably? But I could see Tula and Prachi were like about to leap out of their screen, so please go ahead.
I loved your response, Ankush, absolutely. Thank you for saying that. And I do feel that men absolutely, and any other gender, apart from women as well, we're all sort of touched by it. Our lives have gone out of balance, and we are sort of bringing it back together. Having said that, I must say that there are many, many things organizations have done to also face reality, because you may say that all responsibilities are with all genders, but it's true that outside of the corporate world, and even within the corporate world, not every family is where men are taking men are going beyond gender defined roles. So what we did was we did a lot of webinars where senior most leaders openly shared their pictures, videos of doing jharu pocha bartan at home. And even when they were, even if people had full-time helps at home, even then, how much can you make that one person do? Ultimately everybody had to go beyond gender defined roles, and people were not shy at all. Another thing was that last year we came up with a policy that mothers who have small kids, because they're lactating at that time, of course we have lactation rooms, but what if they travel? So when they travel, then there's a big problem. So and most of the women would say no to travel because they're still lactating, they don't want to stay away from the baby. So we came up with a policy that you travel, we will pay for your child's travel, stay, and the child caretaker's stay and travel. and last year, and it went so well. It was accepted so well. Suddenly we had a lot of women going for client meetings, client travel, etc. And this year, early this year in January, we opened it to all genders, and the thought behind it was that by saying that only mothers can do this is just sort of reiterating that only mothers have the primary care responsibilities of the child. Why not the father? And the biggest challenge we faced when I spoke to my senior leadership about this policy is that no, if you open it to men, it'll become a holiday. Men will take their wives as the caretaker and then child and this and that. No, nothing like that has happened. Men are actually traveling now for work with their child and a caretaker. It could be the mother, it could be someone else, it could be absolutely anyone, and it's not being misused at all. So so by making such policies, and I did it myself, by making such policy only for a mother, I almost sort of reiterated that this is how it has to happen. A child has to be a mother's responsibility. So we corrected that. So it's getting corrected, and it's with this generation, with all of you 200 and something students, I'm absolutely sure that you're working hard, not just mentally hard but physically hard as well, with no house help, and keep up to that, because it's only going to increase with time. So all the best for that.
Just to add just a bit of perspective of mine. See, we're talking about work-life balance more so because of what has happened during the pandemic. Work-life balance has then gotten out of the female agenda and it's become a full company agenda. So work-life balance is being talked about more. So my only point of contention here is, will it take a situation like a pandemic to be able to build in an agenda of D&I? Will it actually take a pandemic like the current to be able to talk about work-life balance? Or what happens when the pandemic is over? Will life go back to the same old normal? Will you as an institution, will you be having a diversity and inclusion topic as a conversation or an extension of this next year as well? Or will you shift to something else? So that's the bigger question that we need to answer today. I mean, having said that, work-life balance requirement was always there. Did we not know that the job of a parent is equal? But did we do it? No. We are now forced to do it. Did we not know that we have to actually help our spouse at home earlier as well? But did we do it? No. Now we are forced to do it. So when we are forced to do it and we do it, unless it actually seeds in, it becomes a habit. Your mindset is changed, and that's why I implied upon unconscious bias and blind spots. It will not be sustainable. That's my only bit on this work-life balance topic.
Thank you so much, Tula and Prachi, for a topic that is obviously very close to your heart. 29 years ago almost, when my mother walked into my kitchen and saw me chopping vegetables to help my wife, she was horrified, because my father, if he came into the kitchen, there was chaos. He was coming in only to ask, why has dinner been delayed? So I think things have sort of come a long way after that, and the danger, Prachi, about men, washing bartans and doing dishes and doing jharu pocha, they're putting it up and bragging about it on social media. Women have done that all their lives. And there's a slightly off-color remark about if men actually went through what women go through every 28 days, we would probably brag about that as well. But I'm going to come to the last question to Saugata. And I think personally, this is a brilliant question. It's probably the best question out of all that I've received. Saugata, do you think the current education system should include diversity and inclusion as part of the curriculum? More importantly, how can it be integrated into the new education policy? I think it's an excellent question.
Indeed, it is a good question. I get an opportunity to interact with some of the government officers, which includes secretary level people, both at Government of India as well as state governments, because I sometimes represent, along with others, the industry bodies. one thing that I keep questioning myself is what needs to be done to consciously create an equal platform. When we highlight so much of D&I, we are already making it a point that a separate treatment needs to be meted out. But at the same time, we don't have an option otherwise, because the awareness or the sensitivity is weak. But like Prachi was saying, they have supported travel for all the employees. That's just one example of trying to be really neutral of things. And whatever it takes, whether it is from the educational institutions or whether it is from the corporate world or whether it is from the government machinery, I think one of our prime objectives has to be to maintain that level of equilibrium, that we need to focus on a particular sector or segment or category. When we do that, that's the time when this unconscious bias steps in and you start differentiating. Like we had in, I don't know of late if it is still there, but earlier days, there used to be a ladies' seat in the bus. Yeah. Now, why should there be a ladies' seat earmarked? I understand if it is for differently able people, but for a gender, why should it be like that? So every time we highlight this, we make them weaker. So while I would definitely support that, probably the academic world needs to have a curriculum on this, but it needs to be very, very well thought of, because students are, formative minds. And at the formative years, if you start putting an impression, it's very difficult to wipe that out through the rest of your life. So while everything needs to be done to ensure that we have greater focus, greater emphasis on these areas, but at the same time, creating a separate bucket for that and then labeling it differently is something that I am principally against. So I don't have a very easy answer to this, Samar, but I shared my perspective.
Thank you, Swagat. That brings us to the end of the question and answer round. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been a fabulous audience. You've heard us all for close to 2 hours. So thank you so much for your time. I hope many of you made notes. I'm told that VGSoM has recorded the entire session. So they will no doubt share it with not only the panelists, but all of you. And I would suggest every couple of times in a year, you must go through this session and other sessions that the Institute organizes for you. Because trust me, when we were your age, we did not have the benefit of industry leaders and veterans like this coming and sharing their wisdom and perspective. So good luck. God bless. Stay well and safe. And thank you. And over to you, Jharna and Palak, whoever has to take it from now.
Thank you, sir. And thank you all the panelists. And thank you for answering our queries. That was an enthralling session, and surely the impressions of today's session will assist our future leaders to think innovatively and take decisions helping the world to be a better place. I once again thank all of you for such an inspiring and captivating session. And I want to apologize for the technical difficulties that some of the students of our batch were facing, owing to which they were unable to on the videos. So, but all of us were eagerly listening to your insights.
With this, we come to the end of the discussion. We would like to thank all the guests once again for patiently answering all the questions and fulfilling the curiosity of our future managers. For good ideas and true innovation, you need human interaction, scrutiny, and debate. Today's discussion has reaffirmed the significance of diversity and inclusion in the new normal. On behalf of the Vinod Gupta School of Management, IIT Kharagpur, we express our heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed panel whose thoughts and insights have enlightened us and showed us that a seamless integration of diversity and inclusion with the strategic objectives of an organization is indispensable in achieving a competitive advantage. We are also thankful to our respected Dean, Professor Pradeep Kumar Ray, and all our faculty members for their presence and unwavering support. Finally, we would like to thank our lively audience without whom Vaachna 2020 would not have been possible. We truly appreciate your enthusiastic participation. Winding the day's proceedings, we once again thank you all for taking your Saturday morning off to be a part of this momentous occasion. Today, we sign off on an ambitious note and promise to keep presenting you with new and diverse perspectives. Have a wonderful day, ladies and gentlemen. Students, you're requested to leave the session and we will proceed for the post-event proceedings. Thank you. Yes, I hope you had a great discussion.
Yeah, we'd like to know your experiences. How did you find the questions and the overall experience of this guest lecture? We certainly enjoyed and got to learn a lot about from this interaction with all of you.
Okay, I'll go first. I loved the interaction. Absolutely brilliant it was to respond to all the questions. Samar had very thoughtfully curated for us, and loved hearing the other panelists, Agat, Tula, and Ankush. Absolutely brilliant, and how lovely to be able to sort of influence and share my experience with all of the students. So brilliant experience. Thanks for inviting.
Thank you, ma'am.
I think thanks for inviting all of us, and I think I will take a step ahead and congratulate the entire VGSoM team for picking up this theme. It is not a topic that most of the institutes or even corporates are very comfortable talking about. It's a very, very pertinent topic, whether it is pandemic or the non-pandemic thing. So I think kudos to your team for picking up this topic. We've all been through multiple webinars. We still talk of employee engagement, team management. Those topics are being spoken about, but I think credit goes to your team for picking up this topic. On that front, I think it's an excellent job.
So thank you once again for inviting all of us. For me, it was a nostalgic effect as well. It brought me back to my college days, and I didn't have a chance to do my master's from India. I did from abroad, Leeds Business School in UK, and we did have some video conferencing those days, so it just brought back flashes of some memories, though not on Zoom platforms, but yeah, in some other platforms. But I also have a connect here at IIT Kharagpur. My father is an alumni. He's a ex-IS finance secretary of the West Bengal government. So there is a correlation of nostalgia as well as me will talk to my father saying, see, I have spoken at your campus now. So it's quite personal to me now as well. But I did enjoy, and I completely agree with Ankush. This topic that you have picked up is a futuristic way forward topic, and I'm hoping all of you all have got some insights of what we tried to say today. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, from my side, this is something that I love doing. And Aaron, you have been chasing me for the last 9 months for this session. I do it every month, at least one. So it's always enlightening for me. And at the same time, it's learning as well, because there are questions, which trigger your mind, your thoughts. There is a generation gap, I would say, between me and you guys. So the way you think, we don't think that way. And I'm not afraid of admitting that. My son is 21 years old. I feel that I am quite good in technology. Sometimes I do go back to him and ask him, how's it done? And it takes him just 1 or 2 clicks to tell me what you are doing is wrong. This is how it is done. So there are things which we should also learn, and we should be adaptive to learn. So that's the advantage that we get through these interactions with students. Well done, very well moderated, and extremely disciplined, I would say. I have been part of some interactions where the level of discipline was not to this extent. So well done.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for accepting our invitation.
Well, for me, by the way, when Sogat said guys, he meant the girls as well. I noticed that my daughter, and he's being inclusive in that, he's not being sexist, so please to accept. I noticed my daughter, who is also 21 like Sogat's son, when she talks to her friends, they all call each other bro and dude. They never say dudette or sis or something. That's more like a black term, but yeah, so that's, we learn from our children every day. For me, as Jharna knows, it was actually a toss-up between an independent leadership talk on the 15th of October, because that was actually finalized first. And this moderation opportunity came up second. And frankly, I prefer leadership talks because I only have to prepare for myself. And it's easier for me to do. And moderation is far more work because I have to look at people's backgrounds, profiles, see the kind of work that they've done in a very limited amount of time, and hopefully try and ask questions that they would be the best suited to answer. But then I thought that the audience will benefit far more from 4 or 5 minds sharing their collective wisdom and experience than just one person talking about it. So with some reluctance, I agreed to moderate this. So Jharna and the rest of the team, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Hopefully you were, in the immortal words of James Bond, both shaken and stirred. Thank you so much.
Thank you all the guests for sharing your experience. Now we'll move forward for the post-event proceedings. And before we go ahead with the faculty interaction, we would like to hand over the session to our student committee. I request Ekansh and Prachi to take over the session.
Yeah, thanks, Palak. Am I audible?
Yes, Ekansh, audible.
Greetings of the day, respected guests. Thank you for the insightful session, and we were truly delighted to hear your thoughts on gender diversity. And it gave us a lot to ponder upon and inculcate some values in our upcoming professional lives. So, thank you for that. We welcome you to the placement committee briefing. So, let's move ahead. Next slide, please. VGSoM was the first B school of the IIT ecosystem, and its foundation was laid in 1994 by the then President of India, Sri Shankar Dayal Sharma. The school was started with the vision to develop a center of excellence in management education and research with a special emphasis on technology-driven industries. Over the next 26 years, VGSoM has taken large strides in the world of management studies by collaborating with several organizations through its MDP programs and various other programs. VGSoM tied up with the Royal Danish Embassy in Dhaka in the year 2000 for mid-level managers, and in 2010, they started offering an executive program for working managers. In the past few years, the Institute has worked closely with organizations to revise and revamp its course curriculum to align with the needs of the industry. These efforts taken by the Institute have been appreciated by our corporate partners and have also been recognized by several ranking agencies. For the year 2020, the NIRF rankings given by the Ministry of HRD, now Ministry of Education, have conferred VGSoM with the 5th rank in the top B schools of the country. We have also been among the top 7 B schools in the country for the past 4 years as per the QS World University rankings, and are also among the top 250 such universities globally. With a strong vision and strong collaboration with the industry, VGSoM has been able to attract some of the best talent for its flagship 2-year MBA program year after year. The batch of 2021 has a pre-MBA average work experience of 25 months and shows representation from the top Fortune 100 companies of India, such as Hindustan Coca-Cola Beverage, Hindustan Unilever, Maruti Suzuki, Ashok Leyland, Oracle, TCS, Wipro, JP Morgan and Chase, Deloitte, Accenture, Reliance, Adani, L&T, to name a few. The batch shows a healthy mix of students from varied engineering backgrounds, and combined with their past experiences, we have been able to offer a diverse set of roles for the summer internships in the domains of consulting, sales and marketing, analytics, operations, and BFSI. For PwC, Accenture, Wipro in consulting, Becton Dickinson, Titan, Texas Instruments in sales and marketing, Tiger Analytics and Ford in analytics, Amazon, Sutherland, Delivery and Ninja in operations, and RBI and HSBC in the BFSI sector. Also, we have recently collaborated with some first-time recruiters who have started offering us roles in product management like JustPay and GeoSav. Now, moving on, I would like to hand over to Prashi to take it ahead.
Thank you, Ekansh. So, to strengthen the curriculum and complement the pedagogy, IIT Kharagpur had tied up with Singapore Management University for an international immersion program for its MBA students. During the program, the students undertook dual projects, one under the aegis of SMU and the other under corporates such as Citibank, DBS, SGX, GSK, and Lending Card. Students had the opportunity to work on some very niche and real-time projects in the domains of project management, financial literacy, market research, econometrics, cost of living index, and analytics. Next slide, please. A well-designed and evolving curriculum and an exposure to both national as well as international business practices has helped the students shine at various competitions. During the immersion program at SMU, one of our teams was global runner-up at Stock Track. That was a global portfolio simulation competition. One of our students was also awarded with the runners-up position at Business Standards Best B School Project Awards. Our students have also shown growth and their performance in several other competitions by reaching national finals and semi-finals of premier contests such as at HUL Lime, Titan Elevate, Reliance TUP, L&T Outthink, etc. The continued faith of our recruiters has been a testimony to the growth of our students and the quality of our program. We have witnessed one of the most successful placement seasons for the year 2020, where the placements were completed within a span of 7 days, a record placement season for the campus. We registered the highest CTC of 29 lakhs, and the average grew by more than 10% as compared to last year. The median stood at 16.99 lakhs. Consulting was the biggest domain of recruitment, followed by operations, sales and marketing, analytics, and BFSI. The placement season saw participation from consulting houses like McKinsey, PwC, Deloitte, ZS Associates, IBM, and Accenture. ITC, Amazon, Blackbuck, NinjaCart, and Vedanta were some of the recruiters in the operations domain. Titan, Crompton, Texas Instruments, and Arvind offered profiles in the fields of sales and marketing. Our legacy recruiters such as Ford, Tiger Analytics, and Virtusa offered roles in analytics as well as BFSI sector. In fact, the BSFI sector was represented by participation from Bloomberg LLP, ICICI Bank, IDFC Bank, and Kotak Mahindra Bank. As a part of our industry engagement program, we reach out to eminent enterprises such as yours to keep ourselves synchronized with the requirements of the industry and meet your expectations. We request you to kindly share the feedback about our campus with your recruitment teams and connect us with them. We hope to build a strong association with you and forge a mutually beneficial relationship with your esteemed organizations. We do believe that given an opportunity, the students of VGSoM would do positively impactful work at your organizations. Had it been, thank you for your time, and we would have really loved to host you at the campus and shown you the beautiful campus of IIT Kharagpur. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to build a mutual relationship with your organizations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ekansh and Prachi. And now we can proceed forward to faculty interaction. I would request respected faculty members to commence the interaction.
I would request the faculty members to kindly unmute themselves. Chandra sir, Vishwarup sir, CS Mishra sir, thank you for joining us today. The other faculty members also.
Good afternoon, this is Vishwarup. And I thank you very much, all the panelists and Shamar for conducting the whole panel. And it was an excellent introduction. I was just a very listener, and it was so good experience for me. I come from industry. I'm an alum of IIT Kharagpur, and after graduating, I had worked more than 30 plus years in industry in large multinational companies. And I came back after completing my tenure in industry. I've just retired and came back to Kharagpur to teach. So I was so much in sync with all your discussions because you come from industry and what you are telling, it is all is so relevant. So thank you very much. Thanks a lot. And I also part of the PlaceCom. So I would request all of you to please help our students for placement. Please connect with your respective HR departments and please help us to place our students. And also I would sincerely request you to visit our campus. This is the time, unfortunately, we cannot, you cannot come, but I'm sure this is a temporary phase. I'm a very positive believer. I'm sure these vaccines will come and we'll beat Corona very shortly. And please, my heartiest welcome to all of you to come to campus, interact with us, have some beautiful lunch at our canteens and walk through the campus. And I'm sure you will like your student days. You will remember your student days. And I'm sure the campus, whether at University of Leeds or campus at Kharagpur, basic nature of campus are same. So don't worry, Tula. The campuses are same, students are same, except the building structures and architects are different. Architects has built different buildings, so that's different. But the heart of the student remains same. So Tula and all of you, heartiest welcome to back to campus. And we will interact. We'll have some chai, bhar mein pee ke chai, and we'll have tikkas by the time, reopening tikkas, and we'll really enjoy. And you can interact with our students. You will really like them. I can assure you, you will really like the faculty and the students and the campus. So that's my personal invitation to all of you. And thank you, and thanks Samar for your excellent skill I was trying to imitate that. I will try to learn a little bit from you and also try to do that as an excellent way. You have led this whole discussion. So thank you, Samar. A big thanks to you and a big thanks to all the panelists. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ghosh.
Thank you, Dada. I think I agree with you. The campus is just structure and building. It's the heart of the students. And I think the heart of the student beats in a similar passionate way as it used to beat in my old days. So
yes, absolutely. These are all 72 bits per minute. So these are all same everywhere. Everywhere it is same.
Dada will come, but you have to promise us macher jol, aloo luchi, kobiraji cutlet, and all the other ilish mach in mustard oil with prawns and everything. Jingri mach, everything you have to give us.
Yeah. Don't worry that we will treat you with the if you come during winters, it will be little challenging to treat you with ilish, but the rest of the things are definitely that luchi and those dal. Definitely, our guest house will offer you that. And in case they fail, my wife will offer you the same at my house.
Thank you. I've been to your campus many years ago when I was in my previous job, and so it's beautiful. Thank you so much.
The campus is now is much more greener, and so you will really like the campus now. And I'm sure it's a huge expansion. A lot of new buildings has come, and you will really like that.
Good afternoon, panel members. This is C.S. Mishra. I am faculty in finance and accounting area. I am with VGSoM since 2007. I was very happy to see the panel discussion on a very bonding topic. And I'm happy the students have organized speakers from different areas, different industries, both industry as well as gender. The panel is very well diversified that way. Yes, we would have loved you to host in the campus, but good that because of this condition, at least we could get the best of the guests for us. Anyway, we definitely look forward to your visit to the campus. And also thanks to the students for organizing a very good show, very good event for that matter. Welcome again to the campus, maybe as early as possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your views. If there are other faculty members also who would like to interact with the guests. Srinivasan, sir, Rudra, sir.
Yeah, yes. So I'm Professor Srinivasan. I teach OB and HR. Of course, this topic is very relevant to my area of teaching. So I used to teach the students on, inclusion and diversity. So this panel discussion would have, given them a broad perspective. I believe, you bring in a lot of examples from the industry to discuss. I always try to do that in my class where I make my students to discuss, bring in a lot of insights. This panel discussion would have given them a different thought process and perspective, how to, approach when they're actually, most of the students in their second year, they're going to embrace the industry now. So it's the right time that they started to appreciate how the diversity and inclusion has to be, considered, how they have to appreciate it in, how the holistic perspective. It adds a lot of value to the students, listening from the, stalwarts like you all. It's pleasure, listening to all of you. Thank you so much for your time and spending with us. And I thank everyone, all the panel members, and also the student committee for having this wonderful event. as other faculty members were saying, we'll be happy to host you whenever, time permits. Please visit our campus and please visit our, department whenever you feel like. When you're passing through, always, our doors are open. Our students will be very eager to, listen to your, lectures or sharing the experience. Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Srinivasan, for teaching this topic as part of your HR. But let me remind you, it's no longer a HR topic anymore. It has
Absolutely
moved across to all segments. So it is
exactly
part of finance and marketing and IT and operations and everything else, whatever you thought. But
so what I completely agree with you, because the thought was we discussed, though of course it is falling under the umbrella of HR and OB, but what we give is it's a part of the thought process rather than domain specific. So that's what we tell the students. You have to have a broader value system as such, so that it doesn't limit to particular domain or a functional area. So I completely agree with your point. Thank you.
In fact, it's a part of the company's strategy.
Exactly.
It's an agenda of the strategy team to be able to see how to marry productivity.
Yeah. Actually, the diversity become a competitive advantage for most of the companies now. They look at how companies are diverse, how they are able to appreciate the differences. We talk about surface level, deep level. So it's very much interesting to make students to understand how value it is.
Beginning of the year, when some of you were in touch with me, and I think I was planning to be there around March. Incidentally, I was telling them that, it's going to be quite a long journey. I have to take a train from Kolkata to Kharagpur, from Howrah, because I left Bengal 32 years back. So my thought process of reaching Kharagpur was like that. But some of you told me that now it is just 3 hours from Kolkata airport. I was very, very pleasantly surprised that things have changed so much. But wonderful to be connected with all of you. And yes, I look forward to visiting the campus definitely sometime in the future once things normalize. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all the guests for such a riveting session. It was wonderful listening to all of you, and we thank our dean and all the faculty members for being a part of the session. We hope that this is the beginning of a deeper relationship with you and your organizations, and we hope to see you in campus as well sometime soon. Thank you, everyone. We hope you all have a wonderful day ahead.
Thank you.
All too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
Sir, thank you,
Thank you,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Thank you,
Thank
sir,
you,
for
sir.
joining us today. Thank you, faculty members. Thank you, Vishwaroop sir, Chandra sir, CS Mishra sir, Srini sir. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Tutan sir, Rudra sir, for being a part of the session today. We can all leave the session. I think the faculty also has left. Thank you, team, for joining us. Thank you for a great presentation.
I think we can go ahead and close the session. Faculty members have also left, I guess.
I guess Rudra sir is still there.
Prasad is still there, I think.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for being part of this. I think we can close.
18 participants. Yes.
Yeah.
Go to
Let's join on another meeting.
Thank you everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.